All right, what is going on? It is drive time. It's a Thursday afternoon. It's about 8 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. What a chaotic NBA trade deadline. It has come and gone. 1 o'clock Mountain Time, so about an hour and 10 minutes ago or so. NBA trade deadline came and went with a bevy of deals, a flurry of deals, if you will. And the Utah Jazz were involved in one minor transaction. We'll talk about that on the show today. Jazz made a total of 5 trades over the course of the past couple of weeks, and some of the biggest names in pro basketball now have new teams. Combined 38 All-Star appearances and 20 All-NBA appearances changed teams prior to the NBA trade deadline today at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. So, of course, we will get into it. We'll talk about it from a Jazz standpoint. We'll talk about it from a big-picture NBA standpoint. Took in some NBA basketball last night here in our fine market. Saw the Utah Jazz get a win over the Golden State Warriors. It was a really fun game. And that was the best closing performance I've seen from the Jazz, maybe all year long, against a team in Golden State that brought a bunch of random players from their G League squad, including a great lacrosse player who once upon a time played lacrosse at Loyola in Maryland and then transferred to Northwestern, played 1 year of college basketball, and now is in the NBA. Kind of an interesting story. His name is Pat Spencer. But the Golden State Warriors roll into Salt Lake City, and they go home with a loss. I got to say, man, Isaiah Collier's grown up right in front of our eyes. I don't know what sort of long-term solution he is at the point guard position, but the more and more I see him, the more impressed I am. We'll talk about it. Keontae with a good game off the bench. I'm surprised that Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, and even Colin Sexton are Jazz men, but we'll talk about potentially why the Jazz decided to stand pat, at least from the standpoint of their 3 vets. And we'll talk about all the picks the Jazz have compiled. I know. It's frustrating that the Utah Jazz did not get involved because a lot of very good players were there to be had. And the Jazz decided to kind of stay on the sidelines. One of the big pieces of news today is that Kevin Durant remains in Phoenix. However, if you follow the league, you know that Kevin Durant is a little bit of a malcontent, and he's a little sensitive. He can be a little sensitive. And so I just have to wonder how the news landed that he was actually being shopped. So we'll kind of get into that on the program today and what could be next with pro basketball, the Utah Jazz, and the NBA as a whole. Winners, losers, things like that. You know the deal. Super Bowl 59 is right around the corner. Coming up on Sunday, you can hear the game on this radio station. We are your home of the biggest and the best football games, both college and pro, in the market here in Salt Lake City. So we're going to have 10 hours of total coverage for Super Bowl 59, Eagles and the Chiefs. Pre-game, of course, the game, and then post-game coverage as well. So make sure to keep it right here when it comes to Super Bowl coverage. Coming up, that line continues to stay Wait a second. Holy smokes. We have some movement. For the first time since the line was released, the line has moved. And it has moved the way of the Eagles. So the Chiefs find themselves as a 1-point favorite as of now. The over-under is 48.5. Money line is even. But we just saw a little movement. And this time it's actually towards Philly. So Kansas City still a slight favorite, but instead of 1.5 points, it's now 1 point for the Super Bowl coming up in the Big Easy. We'll talk some NFL football on the program today. Utah men's basketball got a win last night. It was a bit of an auspicious start, and Colorado made a nice run there in the second half. And a lot of people online very, very nervous, but Utah pulled away there in the end. Big offensive rebound from Lawson Lovery out to Hunter Erickson for a 3, and they kind of ran away from Colorado 72-59. So the Utah men with a nice win. The Utah women continue to play well on the road with a win over Texas Tech. Men hit the road on Saturday for a game against West Virginia in Morgantown. That's a 3 o'clock start, so stay tuned for that and keep that in mind. So a lot to do. National Signing Day yesterday. It doesn't really land the way it did once upon a time, but it is college football topically in February, so it's always fun to get to some of that stuff. So a lot to do on the show today. RSL with a preseason match yesterday. Saw them take a draw from St. Louis. Lachlan Brook with a really nice goal, and RSL with another preseason tilt on Saturday, just a couple of weeks away from the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So soccer right around the corner as well. All right, good guest list on the show today. Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune, covers the Utah Jazz. He'll stop by right out of the gates to talk about this trade deadline and what the Jazz decided to do and what they decided to not do, and how the trade deadline kind of changed the landscape of the NBA, because it did, and it doesn't usually do that. So here's the deal. Richard Smith, live in studio, 3 o'clock hour, 40 years in NBA front offices. Smitty will take us behind the scenes. We'll talk about why certain things got done and ultimately why a lot of things did not. And we'll attack that from a Jazz standpoint. Sean Syed stops by to talk some pro football, some NFL. We'll preview the Super Bowl that lies ahead. Then we'll do a little sports court, as we often do on this Thursday afternoon. So, Andy Larson, Richard Smith, Sean Syed, little sports court with our guys over at Handy and Handy, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. And that guy, Porter Larson, on a Thursday. I don't know that I've ever seen a trade deadline like this. I don't know that we've ever had a trade deadline like this. I mean, it's not just the number of transactions, it's the type of names that are on the move. Like, in any random year, a guy like Brandon Ingram would be the best player that moved teams. And he did, but he might be the 5th or the 6th best player that have moved teams. How have you digested this, man? This has been crazy.
It has been crazy. And you mentioned a little bit of a teeter-totter, a little change in the player empowerment stuff. And when that set off with a trade like Luka headed to L.A., you move a player like him. You move a player like Anthony Davis, who is still, we've talked about, among the better players in the league. That kind of resets the market a little bit, Spence. That opens up the eyes, that opens up the thought processes of teams all around the league, kind of reassessing what they might be able to get away with, what little things they may be able to change about their roster. I mean, the Lakers have a different team, and I think they have a good, at least if healthy, a really good starting unit. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, you mentioned it, man. I don't know that I've ever seen this type of, 72 hours before the trade deadline and the big names that are moving, not just the number of names that are moving.
Yeah, good point. It's not just the amount of transactions, it's the consequential type moves that were made. And we'll get into it from a Jazz standpoint as well. And we'll bring in Andy Larson right off the top today. But before we get to Andy, courtesy of our friends at the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff, which is here, it's time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash. To pay your bills, text FUNDS right now, FUNDS. I don't know why I'm spelling that for you. I think you guys can handle that. But text FUNDS to 508-777-1000. That's FUNDS to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us at ESPN 700. So time now for your opening tip. We'll bring in Andy Larson coming up in just a little bit. And I am not going to review every single deal that went down because that would take all show long. We'll go over some of the notable deals. Then we'll kind of attack this from a Jazz standpoint, then an NBA league-wide standpoint. The Washington Wizards have been very busy because they are very, very bad. And so like the Jazz, their deals have been mostly bringing in draft capital in return for some valuable pieces. They did make a trade for Reggie Jackson. I only bring that up because Reggie Jackson will be bought out and then waived, and then he could be a buyout candidate to play for a pretty good team. So we'll see what happens there. That's essentially what the Jazz did with the Dennis Schroeder stuff. Dennis Schroeder joins Jazz legends Derrick Rose and Russell Westbrook to have been here for a moment and then ultimately be sent on their way. So Dennis Schroeder takes off now. He is going to Detroit, and Dennis Lindsey, former Jazz general manager, is in Detroit. So some interesting synergies there. And Detroit actually has been better this year than I think most people expected them to be. The Jazz, in exchange, KJ Martin and then Josh Richardson. KJ looks like he will stick around. He's Kenyon Martin's son. And Josh Richardson, I believe, has been waived. Looks like Jalen Hood-Schifino might be on his way out as well. Andy will have good insight for us when it comes to the Jazz side of things. But so the Jazz essentially, obviously we're never going to hang on to P.J. Tucker. He is gone. I believe he landed in Toronto after spending a minute in Miami. I think he landed with the Raptors. So P.J. Tucker acquired by the Jazz in that Clippers deal. He's gone. Dennis Schroeder acquired by the Jazz. And obviously it was never going to be a play here long term. And the Jazz essentially did all this to continue. They did help some teams in the West get good. But I talked about this during Crosstalk with Sean. John Hollinger, athletic, former NBA exec, and kind of the grandfather of making new numbers digestible and understandable. He's like an analytics guy that doesn't grind on your ears, which is rare. Wrote a good piece today about how in pro basketball, you're either in or you're out. Period, end of story. And the middle ground teams that's where no man's land exists. And Miami appears to be now a middle ground team. The Jazz are simply out. They're not in right now. They're out. They're on the sideline. They're watching. They're trying to make their developmental program work for their young players. And they're not in a spot where they're trying to go all in on acquiring talent. You know, it's funny. I made the case for the Jazz to trade for Zion Williamson about a month ago. I guess that got some traction here or there because people were talking about that today. Pelicans obviously in a mode where they had to adjust, recalibrate, and they did not move Zion Williamson, but they did move a bevy of other pieces. DeJounte Murray is lost for the season with his injury. So I wouldn't have been stunned if Zion got moved. I mean, look, after Luka was traded, everything was possible. But we'll bring in Andy to kind of break this down. So what the Jazz essentially did by helping facilitate some deals is they brought in 5 additional second-round picks, right? And then small salary deals, which won't extend into next season, deals on expiring contracts and second-round picks. And second-round picks are not exciting for fan bases. They just aren't. But the Jazz clearly reached out to teams and made it very, very crystal clear that pretty much any player on our roster outside of Markkanen and Kessler, and I would say the young players like Keontae and Isaiah, would you trade them? Yes, if the right deal came along. But the Jazz are committed to developing these young players. So when it comes to a John Collins, when it comes to a Jordan Clarkson, when it comes to a Colin Sexton, I am stunned that John Collins is on the Jazz roster. Now, what that means is there were no teams that did their calculation on John and decided that he's worth a first-round pick or maybe even a couple of second-round picks, because the dirty little secret is, even though John has played well for the Jazz this year, he doesn't have a great reputation in the league. And, you know, I always call this the Sharif Abdul-Rahim rule for you old-school NBA fans. Like, Sharif Abdul-Rahim for years was like a 20-10 guy in Vancouver, but they never won. He put up numbers because somebody is going to get the opportunity to put up numbers with better usage. And John has put up good numbers for a Jazz team that isn't trying to win. And that's not always something that translates for a good team that has premonitions of potentially competing for championships. So, look, and by the way, John has a player option next year for $26.5 million. And based on some of the deals that go around, maybe you look at that as not completely outrageous. I just personally don't want to pay John Collins $26.5 million to play for my basketball team if I'm a serious team about winning. He's played well here, but it's different to play well for a young team when you have opportunities for usage and a team that's not trying to win, as opposed to playing for a veteran team that is very good and trying to compete for championships. But like if the Celtics, who are probably just chilling, watching this entire chaos, Oklahoma City too, if one of the contending teams, I thought Denver would do something to help Jokic because Jokic is too good to waste, and I think Denver's doing that. But if any of these quote-unquote contending teams reached out to the Jazz and said, you know, certainly a first-round pick and a salary for John Collins, Jazz would have done that. But $26.5 million, that's a lot of money. And so what does that mean about the players that came back for the Jazz in a potential John Collins deal? I don't know. But I'm sure the Jazz were willing to deal John Collins, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson to a team that was willing to give them draft capital in exchange for the value that those veteran players bring. And obviously what appears to be the deal is there was no value that the Jazz saw or was able to get in a actual tangible offer, as opposed to just a rumor for any of their veteran pieces. Therefore, the Jazz stand pat. So the Jazz get a 2025 Clippers second-round pick. That comes from the Lakers in the Jalen Hood-Schifino deal. 2025 second-round pick, and it looks like it'll be Dallas' second-rounder. Andy's going to kind of unpack this for us. They'll take the most favorable of Detroit, Golden State, and Washington's second-round pick in 2025. That's probably Washington's. And then a 2028 second-round pick, least favorable between Detroit and New York, I believe, if I'm reading this correctly. 2030 second-round pick from the Clippers, and a 2031 second-round pick that is the most favorable of Miami and Indiana's. And, of course, the Jazz also received a 2031 unprotected pick from Phoenix in the deal that saw the Jazz send the Phoenix Suns 3 first-round picks in exchange for 1 unprotected. So that's it from a Jazz standpoint, and there are plenty of other deals to get to. Obviously, we need to break down Jimmy Butler to Golden State. Of course, the massive deal that everybody continues to talk about is the Luka Doncic to the Lakers transaction. I was at the Jazz game last night and talked to a number of NBA people who were at the game. And I can tell you, I mean, people around the league, one NBA exec said to me, there's a conspiracy theory here somewhere. There's something that none of us know. And he said, we probably won't find out until Summer League when everybody's together and actually talks honestly off the record. I don't know if that's at a blackjack table or what, but there's still a sense in pro basketball that there's something about this deal that does not sound correct, that doesn't feel right. There's more than meets the eye. We've talked about the Occam razor theory, which is the simplest explanation usually is the explanation that's actually the truth. And the old saying, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can put its boots on, right? And so there are all these rumors about exactly what went down and a bunch of other deals that we need to get to today because there's just so many things that have happened. And Marcus Smart has been traded to the Washington Wizards. Marcus Smart will be bought out. That's another player on the open market that could help a team. James Wiseman goes to Toronto, once upon a time a top pick. Kevin Porter goes from the Clippers to Milwaukee. Milwaukee, of course, traded for former Ute Kyle Kuzma yesterday in exchange for Chris Middleton, some other pieces. We already referenced Dennis Schroeder goes from the Jazz to the Pistons. And we could keep going. I mean, Quinn Snyder's about to coach Terrence Mann. Think about that for a second, Jazz fans. Terrence Mann is the one that kind of ripped the Jazz hearts out when they thought they had a chance to maybe do something special. But we just did 15 minutes out of the gates and attacked like 10% of what we have to get to when it comes to these NBA trades. So we'll do that coming up. Andy Larson's going to stop by. But before we get to Andy, time now for our Uinta Golf PGA Tour Update Leaderboard, brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf. Go to worldwidegolfshops.com. Check them out at 560 East, 2100 South, Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. They've got a great new Callaway experience. You can experience the future of performance with new shaping materials and AI 10 times Smart Face, delivering up to 8 yards longer with even more forgiveness at Uinta Golf. That feels unfair. But anyway, go check it out. Right now, of course, it is the Waste Management Phoenix Open. A lot of folks down there getting loose, having a good time down in Scottsdale. It's the stadium course. And how about Justin Thomas out of the gates, 5 under par? He's your leader. And everybody's in the clubhouse now. So we got JT at 5 under par. Let's get to some notables here. Jordan Spieth, 3 under par. Haven't seen Jordan on a leaderboard in quite some time. Michael Kim at 2 under par. As we continue to kind of scroll down a little bit, I'm trying to find some of the local players. Apparently, the local players have not played well today. Sam Burns, 1 under par, as is Hideki Matsuyama and Nick Taylor. Wyndham Clark, 1 under par, as is Billy Horschel, Sahith Theegala. So we'll get back to this. We'll let you know where Tony is and some of our local players as the Waste Management Phoenix Open started today and goes through Sunday. All right, we'll catch a quick break, but coming up next, Andy Larson joins us from the Trib to talk NBA trade deadline, what the Jazz did do, and maybe more notably, what the Jazz did not do. So Andy joins us coming up next on a Thursday right here on ESPN 700. NBA trade deadline has come and gone. Richard Smith live in studio for an hour to break all these deals down. And what does it mean for the changing landscape of the league? What does it mean for our local team, the Utah Jazz? But we'll start off with Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune, on a Thursday. Andy, happy Thursday, man. How we doing?
Doing well. It's busy, obviously. It's the busiest Thursday of the year.
This has to be the most consequential trade deadline in pro basketball history, right? I don't think there's even a close second.
I think, yeah, from an NBA point of view, to see, you just don't see superstars the like of Luka Doncic traded ever, right? Like, honestly, I think the last player this well regarded to be traded, maybe Charles Barkley, and then you go to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but like, there are other superstar trades in the NBA, but never a guy that's like this early in his career, right? And so this is pretty special. And then, yeah, you add the De'Aaron Fox onto that, you add the Jimmy Butler onto that. Obviously, Anthony Davis moving as well, and it is like no trade deadline we've ever seen before, I don't think.
All right, let's start from the standpoint of the local team, the Jazz, and then we'll kind of pan out and talk about the NBA big picture. Let's start, Andy, with what they did not do before we get to what they did do, and namely John Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson are all on the roster after the trade deadline when everybody thought John certainly would be dealt, if not the other two. I guess this just means that a team maybe didn't want to pay John Collins $26 million next year, and the Jazz didn't get any offers for draft capital and assets that they were looking for any of the three, because Andy, my guess would be if they even receive maybe a couple of seconds, if not a first for any of them, they all would be gone. So your thoughts first on what the Jazz did not do prior to the trade deadline 90 minutes ago.
Yeah, look, I feel like they've been a little bit of a broken record with this year and even last year, but like when you have long-term contracts for guys above the $10 million mark, teams get really reluctant to spend what they already have on their rosters in order to go get those guys if the production is iffy. Now, look, in the case of John Collins and especially Colin Sexton, like those two guys have played really well this season when they've played, and so you can imagine how they would add to a roster. But in order for a team to match the salary going out, they have to send a $20 million player going out the other way, or a group of $20 million salaries. And the NBA's teams that are competing for stuff don't just have a free $20 million to waste on these spots. There just aren't that many bad contracts in the NBA right now that are obvious kind of matching contracts for those teams that want to upgrade. So I guess I'm not that surprised that John Collins and Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson didn't move. John Collins was the closest. That Sacramento deal was very real. And then the De'Aaron Fox stuff happened, and they had to address this much bigger issue where they needed to find a landing spot for De'Aaron Fox and still stay somewhat relevant by acquiring Zach LaVine. They lost Kevin Huerter in that deal, and that was the obvious matching salary for John Collins, and they don't really have another way to do that deal to acquire John Collins without Kevin Huerter's salary in return. So as a result, that kind of fizzled out, and maybe there were some discussions with the Bulls, maybe some discussions with some other teams, but yeah, like if the Jazz aren't getting some value back in that deal, it doesn't necessarily make sense for the Jazz to dump them just to dump them. And I think there is like a pretty reasonable case to argue that you may get more value with them expiring this summer or next deadline than you might now when, clearly the offers weren't there.
So moving over to what the Jazz did do, 5 deals in totality, and they were the conduit to completions of deals that did change the landscape of the West. And, I know a lot of people have been a little critical of that. Ultimately, why did the Jazz decide to get involved in deals that give the Lakers a generational piece for a decade, that helped the Clippers get under the cap, that helped Jimmy Butler get to Golden State, whatever it is. And ultimately, the Jazz are on the sideline. They're playing possum. They're hanging out. And so, yes, other teams got better, but the Jazz know with their time frame and the next window that would open where they're good, it's really not anytime soon. So your take on the motivation for the Jazz to get involved in these deals and, like I said, be a conduit to their completions, and did the Jazz escape with any real tangible value?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts there. One, I don't think that I think these deals would have gotten done with or without the Jazz kind of being involved, right? Like the Jazz are, if the Jazz wouldn't have taken on Jalen Hood-Schifino's contract. Some other team would have for the cost of 2 seconds. It's just kind of a no-brainer, and it's nice that the Jazz did. And we know from the ESPN reporting on this that the Jazz didn't know that they were involved in a Luka Doncic deal until the final minutes of that deal, right? And then at that point, do you back out? Do you say, oh, no, if Luka's involved in this deal, then we're not going to take these 2 free second-round picks? I don't know that you should, right? Clearly the Jazz plan their whole franchise around trading for someone like Luka Doncic. And it's disappointing that they weren't able to do that. I think what Nico Harrison and Dallas did with that deal, is pretty patently insane. And I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense, what they did to acquire Anthony Davis. But clearly, given that they're acquiring Anthony Davis, they're not interested in John Collins and a bunch of first-round picks, right? They want a actual All-NBA player to try to still compete. And in their, frankly, dumb little brain, they think that Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis is a contending core. Second-round picks, so the Jazz really made, 4 moves this week, which basically one red paper-clipped them from Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills into KJ Martin and 5 second-round picks. That's pretty fancy business. I like that. And look, it's second-round picks from, this year all the way up to 2031. Second-round picks rarely become something. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you can use them in trades for other stuff, whatever. But, to turn, kind of summer signings that I frankly criticize and a little bit of wiggle room under the luxury tax apron to get 5 second-round picks kind of in the course of a week is, I think, an overall value add for the Jazz. Is it what Jazz fans wanted? No. Is it the direction that Jazz franchise needs to go in order to win games? It's not the big step that I think Jazz fans kind of reasonably hope for, but it's progress, and it's better than nothing. And so I think you have to give them a lot of credit for kind of getting what they did get done this week, even if it wasn't the big moves that you hope for.
All right, you referenced the ESPN report, and we had McMahon on Tuesday, the day after he reported that Danny and Justin did not know the framework of the deal which they were participating in, and Dave McMenamin joined us as well, and the term he used was, quote, they were, quote, flying blind. Now, I agree with you, and Tim brought this up as well, that if the Jazz said no to their part in the deal, there are other teams that would have said yes to get some value while they're also on the sidelines the way the Jazz are on the sidelines right now, unserious about winning. Do you think because when I first saw the report, I'm like, that's really odd, because if you're an executive and a roster constructor, part of this deal, I would imagine you want to know every detail of the deal. That's just what I would guess. Do you think it changes anything if Rob Pelinka, if Nico Harrison, they grab Danny on FaceTime or Justin and they get him on the call and they say, look, here's the deal. This is exactly what the trade is. Luka Doncic is going to the Lakers. Anthony Davis is going to the Mavs. Do you think Danny and Justin handle their business any differently at all?
I do think so. And so a couple of, one, I want to say that teams not being aware of what the bigger pieces are in the deal is actually pretty common. That is something that happens relatively frequently when as a third team or fourth team in some of these big deals. It's just hey, we don't need to let you know the big pieces of this, but we can tell you kind of your small part and just is it cool or not, because everyone knows everything is so interconnected with agencies and everything else that keeping these kind of things secret is a big deal. Had the Jazz asked, frankly, I think the Lakers and Mavs cut the Jazz out. But if they had found out that it was Luka in that deal, then I suspect probably the next move for the Jazz is to try to leak it, is to try to create some chaos around the situation and try to get the situation changed a little bit so that instead of looking for Anthony Davis and a first-round pick in return, they're looking to essentially reboot the franchise, right? And in that world, all of a sudden a Jazz offer really makes sense for Luka Doncic. So, one of the things that's been reported in the last week is that Nico Harrison and the Mavs have been surprised at the backlash to this deal. Now, I don't understand how they could be surprised by that, but let's presume that that's true. You get that backlash earlier before the trade even happens, and then all of a sudden maybe, you are looking in a different direction where you are saying, okay, the situation with Luka has deteriorated so that we need to trade him, but you need to, we're going to do more of a rebuilding trade rather than a try to contend still trade. And I don't know if that would have worked, but for the cost of you're turning down 2 second-round picks, it's probably a strategy that would have made sense. Again, given that the Jazz didn't know about that, and given that the Jazz, like every other team, like every other executive in the league, didn't think Luka Doncic was actually available to trade for, I don't think it's realistic to expect them to have done that.
All right, so another piece of I get the same questions that you probably get from people that I know that really love the Jazz, and with all of these players that were available, and it wasn't like in a regular year, Brandon Ingram might be the best player moved. In a regular trade deadline, he's like the 5th or the 6th. Is there anything fair to be critical about concerning the Jazz deciding to stay on the sidelines and not make a play for any of these really, really good players? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm not a fan of Brandon Ingram as a player. I think the Jazz could have gotten him if they wanted him. And heck, there was a report a couple months ago. I think it was Jake Fisher who said the Jazz and Pelicans talked about a Brandon Ingram deal, and then that kind of got scuttled by the fact that Ingram didn't want to re-sign in Utah. And it sounds like, maybe he would actually re-sign with the Toronto Raptors, and that might be market size and have, the Raptors having Scotty Barnes versus the Jazz having Larry Markkinen, whatever. He may think that that's a better fit for him and his wife, right? Great. But ultimately, I don't want the Jazz to commit a max contract to Brandon Ingram, right? I just don't think that he's a difference maker in a way that actually significantly changes the Jazz's franchise. And ditto with a lot of the other guys that were traded, right? Does a 32-year-old Anthony Davis make sense for the Jazz? Not really to me. Does Jimmy Butler, a whiny Jimmy Butler at 35, 36, make sense for the Jazz? No. So, De'Aaron Fox maybe makes some sense, but ultimately he wanted to go to San Antonio. And then, again, I'm not in love with paying him a huge max deal, given that he is a sub-all-star level player. I think he's a very good player, but, ultimately that's kind of what we're talking about. So I'm fine with the Jazz. Obviously you wish you could have gotten Luka Doncic. It's insane what the Mavs did with Luka Doncic. But beyond that, no, I didn't see any opportunities for the Jazz to go big game hunting in this market when they are so far away in every other aspect of the franchise that going big game hunting for one star doesn't actually change the equation that much.
And I agree. I mean, I don't know if Zion was available. I made a plea for that about a month and a half ago because it just felt like the Pelicans were going to have to pivot and do some massive reset. And ultimately, if the stuff in Dallas is real about them being concerning Luka's habits and conditioning, penny for New Orleans thoughts on Zion stuff. But, anyway, before we get to some big picture league stuff, let me ask you a couple of other questions about the Jazz who actually are still playing games and they're still trying to compete. And I was at the game last night. Fun to be there. I wanted to kick the tires with some people about their thoughts on this trade deadline. Can I ask you about Isaiah Collier? I mean, look, yeah. The fact of the matter is, Andy, and you know this as well as I do, if my man can't learn to shoot, he's just not going to be in pro basketball. You cannot have a lead guard or even a wing that just can't shoot at all. And the numbers aren't great. He had a bunch of wide open looks last night. Golden State was daring him to shoot, knocked down one from the corner. But if you take the shooting off the table, which you can't do, ultimately, everything else feels like it's really moving in the right direction. I've been impressed with him. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, in the unofficial power rankings of the Jazz's 6 rookies and sophomores, I think he's pushed his way to the top of that list, and some of that's due to the competition there. But I think he has been really impressive over the last 3 weeks and months, and there's a reason why ultimately Will Hardy chose to put him in the starting lineup above Keontae George is because he is kind of doing the right things with the ball. I mean, the thing I'm most impressed with Isaiah Collier is that he was the number 1 recruit, high school recruit in the nation, and now is a pass first point guard for the Utah Jazz, right? For a guy like that to have the recruiting profile that he did, to have all the hype and everything like that, to kind of put his own scoring to the side and say, hey, I'm just going to try to get 11 assists a game for the Utah Jazz is pretty cool. You're right. The shooting is the question, right? If he can't shoot, he won't be able to play in the NBA. And he's shooting 22% from 3 for the season. That's up actually a decent amount from the 18 it was a week and a half ago, but so maybe some good strides there. I ran a search on Basketball Reference the other day to look at point guards who, in their rookie season, shot under 25% from three, and just saw, like, is there any history of guys like that making it in the league? And there is, so, like, I did it since 2000 because obviously you want the game to be similar to what it is now. But guys like Jeff Teague were not a good shooter coming in. Dennis Schroeder actually was a really bad shooter coming in. I wouldn't say that there are any stars in this list. I guess Derrick Rose was on that list, but Isaiah Collier's not Derrick Rose. Let's not be silly. Jamal Tinsley was on that list as a guy who couldn't shoot but kind of figured it out. And maybe I kind of like that comp best as like a modern Jamal Tinsley, a guy who can score a little bit, but mostly you trust him to pass and set up his teammates well and then defend at a reasonable level. So none of those guys, again, I don't expect Isaiah Collier to be a star, but there is a path there for him to improve his shooting enough that he can play in the league for sure, and be a nice piece on a good team.
Keontae off the bench. I know we kicked the tires on this when Will elected to make that decision. I like the path that Will has elected to take here because I just think if Keontae is going to be an NBA player for a team that's serious about winning, this is his role. So give me your thoughts on the way Keontae has reacted. Like when you talk to him about this, when you're in the locker room, does he feel like this is a demotion? Is he having a tough time embracing it? I thought he was really good last night, but it has been up and down.
Yeah, I would say, from the press conference and press situations that we've had him in, he was mad about it at first. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. And the truth is that starting is a big deal for NBA players, and that is there are so few guys in the league. The right thing to say is, hey, I don't care wherever coach needs me. Great. That's not the reality. There is like a status there of being an NBA starter that is taken away. And Will Hardy was pretty frank about saying that he hoped that would be kind of a wake-up call for Keontae to start trying on the defensive end, frankly. The defense, I think, has been a little better. I think ultimately, like, he's trying a lot harder on that end. He's just never been coached on defense ever before in his life, so he has no idea how to play it. So it's not just effort, it's also execution, which he's not doing. But at least effort is a first step there to play well. And then, it's an efficiency equation, too, on the offensive end, right? Like, is the offense good enough to make it worth the bad defense? Last night it really was, right? He shoots 8 for 13, scores 26 points, hits the game winner. It's really great. He needs to be more on the right side of that equation more often by taking the right kinds of shots on the offensive end and setting up his teammates more often. So, yeah, it was a challenge to Keontae. I think like you said, the returns have kind of been up and down so far. There have been some really bad games since then too, but we'll see what the second half of the season presents in terms of this. But, I guess I'm more optimistic about him figuring that out than I was while he was starting and while he was kind of lackadaisically playing through all of his minutes.
I don't know what the origin story is of pups can't raise pups, but Drew Eubanks, Patty Mills, that was kind of their deal. Like, hey, they're not very good, but pups don't raise pups. Well, are pups now raising pups?
I mean, yeah. But
right.
Look, pups can't raise pups. If you do a Google search for pups can't raise pups, that was a phrase that was completely made up by the Jazz. Like, there are no results are returned before the summer of 2024 when Justin Zanuck said this for the first time. I get the philosophy there. Also, frankly, there are still veterans on this roster, right? Like the idea that Keontae George didn't learn anything from Chris Dunn on the court, right? Like, Chris Dunn is a terrific defender and playmaker, and Keontae chose to kind of make his path in his own way that wasn't in the direction of Chris Dunn, despite Chris Dunn's veteran leadership, despite his locker being right next to his, blah, 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 all that stuff. Like, despite them being pretty close off the court, by the way, like, I don't see any of Chris Dunn's game in Keontae George. I don't really believe that Drew Eubanks was really changing Kyle Filipowski's career trajectory. And I don't really believe that Patty Mills is changing Isaiah Collier's trajectory, right? Like, in the end, I just don't see veteran leadership as working that way. And I think maybe it keeps the locker room more engaged. Maybe it keeps everyone happy and a little bit, positive in a season where they're losing a ton of games. But pups are the pups are going to be raised kind of no matter what, because it's in the pups' best interest to play as good of basketball as they can so they can make $100 million.
The AI overview of Pups Can't Raise Pups, it says, if a puppy is unable to raise her pups, it usually means she is too young, physically incapable due to health issues, or is rejecting the litter. I mean, if we want to get weird, you could actually apply that to the situation.
I'm so excited that we're getting I mean, look, you're not the only one to like kind of laugh about that phrase, right? Like us beat writers also frequently bring it up as like a funny thing. But look, like I said at the beginning of this interview, like I criticize the Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills acquisitions as much as anyone, because I'm like, hey, just go out and get a young guy who might be something. And the Jazz turned those contracts into 5 second-round picks this week. So I might have to eat crow on that more than anything else.
All right, let's a couple of minutes left. Let's pan out and talk big picture pro basketball. Who changed your opinion of them the most in the immediate future during this trade deadline?
I still am. I think the Lakers, honestly, and I mean, part of this is me being somewhat of an Anthony Davis hater in like kind of big situations, and kind of thinking the bubble was a little bit of a fluke, especially with his shooting, right? Like it's kind of the only point in his career where Anthony Davis has been a good 3-point shooter. And I think that opened a lot for the Lakers that they haven't had since. I think having Luka and LeBron makes them more dangerous than having LeBron and AD. And I understand that AD and LeBron are kind of a more theoretical fit because it's a big guy and a perimeter player, and Luka and LeBron is 2 perimeter guys. But I think just frankly, the threat that both of those guys present while playing together or separately means that their offense is going to be good for 48 minutes a night. And then you kind of figure out the defense stuff later. And you know, I think I don't know that I love the Mark Williams acquisition cost-wise, but I do think he makes them a better player just filling those center minutes compared to what they had. So, yeah, I think the Lakers, I wouldn't say that they're a tier 1 contender, but I think they're, you know, the second or third most likely team in the Western Conference right now to get out of the Western Conference and make it to the NBA Finals.
You know, I was going to ask you who changed your opinion of them long term. That's obviously the Lakers as well. So I'll end with this question, Andy, because, you know, like everybody else on Saturday night, I'm hanging out. I get the alert on my phone. I get 10 different text messages, and I say to everybody who texts me, this isn't real. Like, there's no way Dallas has done this. And I still, as we're sitting here, you know, 5 days later, I still cannot believe they did it. And I'm not buying anything I'm hearing. Now, I've reached out to a lot of people across the league. Some got back to me, some didn't. And, you know, the Occam's razor theory is the simplest explanation, is usually the most correct. And that is they were legitimately concerned about his habits, and they didn't think investing $350 million in him was the right move. To which I say, if you do not want to supermax Luka Doncic, you are in the wrong business. So give me your best guess as to exactly a front office exec at the game last night said conspiracy theory. We'll find out during Summer League when everybody's together. What's your best guess? Why did Dallas do something that most every basketball person I've listened to or read thinks is beyond insane?
I think it's like a combination of a bunch of like cognitive biases that basically boil down to Occam's razor, and like Nico seeing the trees way too much, compared to the forest of just having Luka Doncic for the next 10 years, right? So like the conditioning, the money stuff, the whininess, blah, 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 all that stuff is really, really small potatoes when you're not affiliated with the Dallas Mavericks. But when you are, like, that stuff grades on you every day. And then I think it's a really good point that Nico got his start in this business by being Kobe Bryant's guy, right? Like, and people who grew up with that, and I guess not grew up, but had the experience of that as their major formative basketball experience, see Luka, like, see kind of the difference between Kobe Bryant's, like, insano, get up at 4 a.m. work ethic and think that is how an NBA champion is born and is made. And Luka being kind of the opposite of that in a lot of ways, just kind of being very naturally talented, being very chill, would be difficult for them to see how, for Nico to see how that plays out. Like, and, you know, we can get into like a, you know, Miriam Adelson conspiracy or whatever. I just think that that's probably less likely than this one man got really annoyed and in the end just didn't like Luka Doncic very much, and then started to look around the league and say, okay, if I'm going to trade Luka, what's the best star I can get? And he thought it was Anthony Davis, and he wanted a defensive star because, you're looking for the opposite of your ex, and that's where we ended up. Like, I do kind of think that that's the most likely situation, is that, like, this one dumb GM just kind of overthought himself and overlived this experience of thinking Luka's, 2 out of 3 out of 10 problems were 8 or 9 out of 10 problems. And that's where we ended up where we did today. But, like, look, I mean, like you said, you talk to people around the league, they are as shocked and as frustrated and frankly angry about this deal, because it does change the course of the league for the next decade for sure.
Wild stuff, Andy. I would imagine you've got a lot of stuff coming out of the Trib, yeah?
Yeah. Trade deadline recap, kind of a where the Jazz stand now column. And then, some actual, kind of breaking down some reporting on the rookies, second-year players, and kind of guys up and down the roster. So it's a busy couple of weeks for me for sure.
SLTrib.com. Andy, thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Spence.
All right. Valentine's Day right around the corner. Guys, get ready. Say it with flowers this Valentine's Day with Harmon's Flower Shop. Every arrangement is crafted by a Harmon's floral designer, adding a thoughtful, personal touch to your Valentine's gift. Partner with the best growers to bring you fresh, long-lasting flowers that truly impress. Whether you need a last-minute Valentine's surprise or want to plan ahead, Harmon's makes it simple with flower shops in every store and delivery available from our full-service West Valley shop. From classic roses to trendy blooms, Harmon's offers a wide variety of flowers to help you find the perfect arrangement for your someone special. Check out the Surf and Turf, Double R Ranch Beef, Prime, Choice, and Wagyu, all available. If you need cooking tips, you can just ask a Harmon's associate. They got Miss Kavanaugh's Chocolate Hearts right now, made locally in North Salt Lake. Choose from mint, caramel, or peanut butter, and if you want a custom heart, just ask a Harmon's Bakery associate. Locations and information can be found at harmonsgrocery.com. All right, coming up next, Smitty, live in studio. For an entire hour, we'll break the NBA trade deadline down from the vantage point of the Utah Jazz and some big picture stuff as well. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go on a Thursday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, you've heard of Woj bombs. You've heard of Shams bombs. Have you heard of Smitty bombs? Is the question as Richard Smith is live in studio for an entire hour. Smitty, are you ready to drop some Smitty bombs?
Hey, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people who use that phrase, but it has a whole different context.
Yes, no, we're not talking about that context.
I don't want to get into that stuff.
We're just going to stick with basketball today and the NBA trade deadline coming and going. How you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great. This is I was just talking to James Peterson a few minutes before I came in the studio, and he was asking me, do you miss this time of year? And I said, it's interesting because this time of year, it's always in early February, and it's kind of it's a big scouting period for college and stuff, and just before the All-Star break. And so it kind of comes at a good time work-wise, but you get all the people who are involved in these kinds of transactions and all the people in a particular staff that are able to weigh in on them. And there's a lot of spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere because I don't know what the actual number would be, but I would guesstimate that of all the trades that are talked about and really the teams might consider in some respect, probably between 2 and 5% of them actually get consummated. Like the vast majority just don't happen for whatever number of reasons. And so it's always a time of year where you're doing a lot of work, a lot of film study, a lot of phone calls, a lot of digging into research, and then at the last second, somebody says, "Oh yeah, the other team fell by, so it's out," and you're going, "Oh, I just spent all this time doing such and such, whatever. I could have been doing something else, but that's the gig, So, and that's what a lot of teams obviously were involved in these last few weeks in the NBA.
So you referenced 2 to 5% of deals talked about actually happens. It feels like this time around that number might be higher. I don't you've been doing this forever. I've been around the league my whole life. This feels, Smitty, to me like the most consequential NBA trade deadline of all time. We have 38 combined All-Star appearances on the move, 20 combined first-team All-NBA appearances on the move. Would you concur with that assessment? Potential, and look, only time will tell. You're always good to remind us of that, but this feels like, as of today, a knee-jerk instant reaction, the most consequential trade deadline in pro basketball history.
Well, it involves so many big names, right? And it got off to a bang last week with the Laker and Mavericks deal. But it's interesting, you can contrast that, all the stuff, and I know you've been talking, and you talked with Andy last segment about do you really believe, what they're reporting out of Dallas, LA, that how it actually took place was actually the deal? There's got to be something else, and there's got to be some other stuff that was going on or whatever. But that was very different than the stuff we saw, all along the last several weeks, right, with Jimmy Butler in Miami, where everybody knew that the marriage was done and that he was going to leave. And they were trying to get a deal for him and what have you. And, there's a lot of different angles to it and a lot of different people weigh in on the Butler thing and what was going on, all the drama around it. And yet the Dallas, LA thing, nobody knew about it until it happened. And so you can see two different divergent ways of handling these kinds of things with big name players. And what it's an interesting study about, is there a better way to do it? Is there one way is better than the other? Is this one makes sense and that one doesn't make as much sense, or what have you? And so you can debate those things a long time, but at the end of the day, an individual team is going to do what they think makes sense for them and the business they're trying to take care of, and without regard to what anybody else is doing or what anybody else thinks about the way they're handling their business.
So from a Jazz perspective, let's dig into what the Jazz did do. Then we'll talk about what the Jazz did not do. So all in all, with the deals the Jazz made, they received 5 second-round picks. In essence, Drew Eubanks, Patty Mills gone. And then the Jazz took on some smaller salary deals, and they sent a lot of those players on. Dennis Schroeder is in Detroit. Mo Bamba has been waived. P.J. Tucker, I think, ended up in Toronto after spending a minute back in Miami. And I think Jalen Hood-Schifino will also be waived. So 5 second-round picks. Then they received the 2031 unprotected first-round pick from Phoenix that they received in exchange for 3 first that they sent to the Suns, the least favorable of Utah, Minnesota, Cleveland. We already broke that deal down. So strictly from an asset addition standpoint, and then I want to ask you about KJ Martin.
Sure.
Because, look, I think there might be a little something there. Jazz fans might remember KJ Martin because he set his career high against the Jazz twice, 21 points, 27 points. He started 49 games for the Rockets a couple years ago. Look, I'm not saying that he's some answer, but from an asset accumulation standpoint, what do you make of what the Jazz did? And then explain to our listeners what their motivations were in making these transactions.
Sure. So the Jazz are in full rebuild mode, as we know. They're in the middle of a third year of this tear down and rebuild, however you want to label it. And so they know they're not winning now. They know they're not going to win next week or next year. They're trying to develop young guys and also along the way try to get a veteran here or there that they think can help them and start moving forward and start making progress. So, all of the moves that they were involved in were all about asset accumulation, meaning get as many draft picks as we can, get as many either expiring contracts or contracts of guys that we can turn around and flip around for something else, like the P.J. Tucker deal. You knew they weren't going to keep him. I felt, and you and I discussed this last night at the Jazz game, neither one of us felt that they were going to hold on to Dennis Schroeder. It didn't make any sense, but he was a cog for them to be able to do something else that helped them in terms of their long-range planning. So that's the mode that they're in. And every team has its own motivation, Spence. Some of the teams are trying to get a guy to help them, maybe one more guy that helps in a rotation that can help us, like the Cleveland deal today, getting DeAndre Hunter. Very good move, I thought, by them.
I agree, yeah.
He's playing very well for Atlanta and having a nice, quiet season, but playing very efficiently for them. And I'm not sure, they gave up much, in terms to get someone who can help them, maybe that last piece they feel, can get them, on top or toward that mountaintop. So that was a great move for them. So they're in that mode of thinking. The Jazz, the Washington Wizards are teams that are in the opposite mode of just trying to get as many assets as they can for future use or for other movements or to take money off their books or whatever it is. And so every team has its own motivation. Every team has a different way they're going about it. And then, nothing's been talked about, and I'm sure there'll be fallout of it going forward. But all the noise that was coming out of Phoenix about trying to get Jimmy Butler there didn't work out, mainly because of the Bradley Beal no trade clause. And then there was scuttlebutt in the last several days about, maybe they'll move Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant saying, well, I don't want to go back to Golden State or whatever. All those things that were going on, all that drama that was going on, right? Well, Spence, now the dust is starting to settle on the trade deadline. Phoenix didn't do anything in that regard. So they have their three big guns still there, Booker, Durant, and Beal, right? They are looking this summer for a team that's right now at 500, struggling to try and get in the playoff situation and maybe get in the top six if they could even squeeze in there at best case scenario. They're looking this summer having a total outlay, payroll, taxes, and penalties of over $400 million for a team that's not in with the big boys at the moment. Now, you look at their roster, they go, well, they got three big boys. Yeah, well, for whatever reason, it's not working. And now we're going to be paying all this money for something that's not getting us what that desired result is. So you look at a franchise like that, they didn't get anything done this time because of the Beal no trade clause. And now you're looking at them, and they've got to be sitting there going, oh, man, what are we going to do? Because we are stuck in the corner, and we have no way anytime soon. And that's a big 12 months ago had all these thoughts about being at the top of the heap.
Yeah, and I want to get into that in a little bit because I do think, Kevin Durant is shown to be a little petty and a little sensitive, and his feelings get hurt. And he did not request a trade, and the Suns kicked the tires on him anyway. I mean, look, after Luka gets traded, everybody's got to be looking around going, what's going on here? Like, nobody's safe.
Hey, Spence. You want me to give you the list? Babe Ruth, Wilt Chamberlain, Wayne Gretzky. However long you want me to make the list, everybody is tradable. All these things that you read and hear about, oh, he's untouchable. Let me tell you, nobody literally in professional sports is untouchable if the right deal comes along, or if you have someone who's in a position like Nico Harrison, the general manager in Dallas, who supposedly made a singular decision and got obviously the okay at the 11th hour by ownership that if that's what you think we should do, then we'll do it. But those people act because of the information they have, because of the intel that they know that maybe other people don't, or other people misconstrue, or whatever it is. And that's the job that those guys have. And, I'm not saying I agree, disagree. I can't, I can't weigh in on that stuff just because it's too early to tell all that stuff. All that stuff will play out in good time. But to have the confidence in what you believe makes sense to you at that moment in time is a big deal for an organization that really shook everything up and is still feeling the ripple effects, and they will for a while.
I have to say I'm proud of you for bringing up the Babe Ruth trade without getting upset as a Red Sox fan. And, of course, I'm a Yankee fan because the curse of the Bambino appeared to be real for a while, and then steroids and David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez changed all that. But let me but I do want to ask you about KJ Martin. And in fact, let me just ask you now, because I think the Luka topic is more interesting. Like I said, KJ Martin is not a piece that is suddenly going to change the perspective of the Jazz, but of all the names I heard they received, you and I talked to the game last night. Schroeder was gone. Okay, we knew that. Now he's a Piston. There's no way Tucker was around. Like I said, he's been rerouted twice. I think he's in Toronto. Jalen Hood-Schifino got jimmered. His third year didn't get picked up, and so I don't think he's an NBA guy. There's a little bit to like about KJ Martin, though, isn't there? I mean, 49 starts for the Rockets. He's not just a throwaway end of the bench guy. I think we might see him get some minutes, don't you?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that I would not be surprised if they were using him as a long look, as a personal look. So you bring him in. Mm-hmm. He's young enough. He's shown you that he has some skill, some ability. Okay, sometimes guys need a certain team to just get in and get a certain niche and a certain feel for that. With him, my guess is that he came available. They said, hey, this isn't any big consequence to us financially. We're not getting into a big hole here. He's a young guy. He fits a mold in terms of a long, wing stretch guy, maybe a 3-and-D guy, maybe, I don't know. But, he's certainly worth looking at more closely to give him some run, I would think, and to also get him in your locker room, get him with your group, find out on a personal level the next couple of months. Is he a guy we want to work with going forward? Is he a guy that doesn't really fit what we're doing? Whatever it is, these are always the kind of guys in the time of the year that you see that happening with a lot of teams, like in a position like the Jazz, where you can afford to just try something, and you see it happens and it doesn't happen, it doesn't work for you, whatever it is, and then you just move on, or you go, hey, we got a nice little piece here. Let's give him another couple years or something, and get him into the group and see how that plays out. So that's part of the laboratory experiment that the Jazz are going through, that we've talked about before, Spence, about mining for gold and throwing it in the river and shaking the pan, and the rocks and the sand and everything comes out, and maybe you find a gold nugget or two along the way. That's what they're doing, I think, with a guy like KJ Martin.
So a little background on KJ. He was a Sierra Canyon kid, if that sounds familiar. That's where Bronny James played. He played on a team with Scottie Pippen Jr. and Cassius Stanley. Averaged 17 and 10 for a team that won the California Open Division back-to-back years. He was going to go to college at Vandy and then opted for a postgraduate year at IMG. 20 points, 8 boards at IMG. And then he had that game at the National Prep Showcase where he dropped 37. He decided to declare for the draft. He was a second-round pick from the Kings in 2020, traded to the Rockets. Spent the first part of his rookie year with the G League team. and then was activated 2021 in 2021 on January the 4th. So he did have some good years with Houston before being traded. His season and career high is 27 points against the Jazz back in 2021. And his 3 years in Houston, 45 games played, 9 points, 5 boards, first his rookie year. Second year played in 79 games, 2 starts, 8 points, 4 rebounds. His third year was his best year, where he played all 82 games, started 49 of them, played 28 minutes a night, had 13 points, almost 5.5 boards, only shot 31 from 3 and 68% from the free throw line. Then didn't really play much for the Clips, moved on to Philadelphia. So, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm trying to stretch this out into something that it's not, but he is a young player that we'll get a look here. We'll see if he can get some minutes.
How old is he right now?
24 years old.
Yeah.
He's 24.
So that's still a developmental guy, and it's a guy who's bounced around a little bit. And that's a guy you kick the tires on if you're the Jazz, and you just say, hey, we'll take a look at him and see what we think, and the coach likes him, doesn't like him, whatever. And then we decide after that what we think we want to do going forward.
And just turned 24, January birthday, so a young 24. All right, last topic here. And, you texted me this, and I chuckled because I keep talking about the Occam razor theory, which is the simplest explanation, is the one that usually you land on. And a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on, the old saying, right? So I've talked to you about this. I've talked to other people around the league about this. There are some different opinions. Bottom line, why did Dallas do this? Bottom line, your understanding of the situation. You know people that are with Dallas. You know people that were with Dallas. Dennis Lindsey in Detroit spent some time with Nico. So my guess is Smitty, why did Dallas elect to do this? Because from a basketball standpoint, I personally just don't see it.
Yeah, well, it's I don't. You never know the whole story, Spence. So that's the first thing we put out there. Nobody knows the whole story except the few handful of people that are right in the center of that, making it happen. But I will say this: my take on it is this: I believe that when Nico Harrison decides that he wants to consider something like this, the story I read about him meeting with Rob Pelinka in a coffee shop a month ago, through the idea they have a long relationship with each other. From back when Nico Harrison worked with Nike, and he was working with Rob Pelinka, who was working with Kobe Bryant, and Kobe Bryant was Nico Harrison's guy, and all that. So they have a relationship that goes back a lot of years in a different context. Now you get to the present day, they feel they can be secure with each other. They feel they can be confident with each other that anything they discuss is going to stay between the two of them. They supposedly have a discussion, hey, would you ever think about this? Would you think about this? And whatever, and they decide to keep it among themselves. I don't have any problem believing that's what actually took place. And because over a 6+ year period, and Nico Harrison wasn't there for all of it, but he's there ever since he got to Dallas several years ago. He lived every day with the whole Luka Doncic thing. You like him, great player, great talent, a good guy. He's not a bad guy. Nobody should paint him in that light. The whole question about anything around him as a professional, as an NBA player and one of the top players in the world, literally, is whether he is fully committed to his conditioning, to his skill development, to getting better, or is he one of these guys who's content with just coming and, as we used to say, with Kevin O'Connor a lot, there's some guys who just are satisfied getting a C- in the class. As long
C's
as
get degrees.
So as long as I pass the class, that's all I'm worried about. And I'm not saying this is it, but I'm apostolizing out there that maybe Nico had seen every day for several years that we're trying to get this guy to move in this direction. And now he was with Kobe Bryant. So Kobe Bryant was a different animal. He was on the other end of the scale, working out, fit, diet, all that stuff, 25 hours a day, his entire career. So that was different. Okay, so that's way over there on that end of the scale. But Luka Doncic was known for, having, I don't know, so tough time, but just not being in the shape you'd want him to be in. And because of that, that affects your ability to stay healthy. It starts affecting your joints, whether it's your feet, your ankles, your knees, your low back, whatever it is. And so that gets you off the floor. So my theory, my feeling is that Nico had seen all that and had said, you know what, I'm not sure that I'm convinced that he is going to eventually get it, because we've been doing this for 6+ years and he hasn't adopted that the way we want, and it hasn't gone the way we want in that particular aspect of his career. And so I'm not sure that we as an organization should be in the position of trying to decide whether to give him what would have been this summer a super max deal in the neighborhood of $350 million. Can we make that kind of a call on a guy who hasn't shown that he wants to do it in that regard? And what is his motivation going to be if and when he gets $350 million? Okay, so that's what I think. I think that's a bigger part of what went into that decision. Only time will tell if he's right, or if maybe Luka gets around LeBron James and goes, hey, oh, this is how you do it. LeBron goes, yeah, hey, this is the way, come on, man, let's go. And he goes, oh, yeah, well, I want to be LeBron James. And so, okay, I guess, maybe. So in a perfect Laker world, Lakers are going, we hope that happens. Mm-hmm. In the Dallas world, they're going, yeah, we'll see. We're going to stand on the sideline and we'll see. And that's what I think took place.
All right. I mean, it is a massive risk. We'll see how it plays out. All right, time now for our PGA Tour scoreboard update, brought to you by friends at Uinta Golf. Check them out at worldwidegolfshops.com. You can stop by their location at 560 East, 2100 South. They're also in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. Check out the new Titleist, new Pro V1s, and the new Pro V1X. It brings you more speed and control than ever before. Now available at Uinta Golf Shops by Worldwide Golf. We got the Waste Management Phoenix Open going on right now in Scottsdale, the stadium course. And looks like Wyndham Clark has made a charge. He's still out on the course. Wyndham is 5 under par, which ties him with Nikolai Højgaard and Justin Thomas atop the leaderboard. But JT and Højgaard are in the clubhouse. Wyndham is 500 through 11. Jeez. Jake Knapp, Corey Connors, Andrew Putnam, Adam Schenk, Taylor Moore, and Alex Smalley are 4 under par. Some notables, Jordan Spieth at 3 under, as is Kurt Kitayama. Looks like Michael Kim at 2 under par, Peter Malnati at 2 under par. Some golfers really struggling when you look at the bottom of the leaderboard. Ricky Fowler and Max Homa, 4 over par. Lucas Glover, after a good weekend last weekend, 4 over par as well. So we'll get to more updates as far as the PGA Tour scoreboard goes. But coming up next, more with Smitty right on the other side on a Thursday on ESPN 700. Richard Smith live in studio. The NBA trade deadline came and went. At 1 o'clock Mountain Time, the Utah Jazz made one minor move. They sent Dennis Schroeder on to Detroit. The old general manager of the Utah Jazz, Dennis Lindsay, now in Detroit. So Dennis Schroeder adds some veteran leadership to a team that's actually played pretty well this year with the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, Smitty, we've been breaking down the most impactful deals. I think this is the most consequential, for better or for worse, and you're always good to remind us, the time will tell, trade deadline in NBA history. We've talked about this from the standpoint of the Jazz and some big picture stuff. And you gave us a good list of players historically in every sport who have been traded, whether it's Babe Ruth or Wayne Gretzky, and everybody's available if the right deal comes along. Did you guys ever get close to trading John or Carl?
No,
I didn't think so.
No, that wouldn't have gotten by Larry. Larry just loved both Carl and John so much, and rightfully so, as we all did. We were all on that gravy train for almost 2 decades, but. It was never a thing. Of course, we had several summers where Carl, threatened, in the media, I'm not coming back and this and that, whatever. And he and Larry would get together and they'd patch it up and that was a father-son relationship type thing. And then John had a couple of opportunities as a pending free agent to maybe go somewhere and make some more money and get a bigger payday. Right in the height of his career. And, twice he famously just sat down with Larry individually without an agent. They went to lunch. Hey, Larry, if you can do this, then I'm okay. I get it. And Larry's going, well, I don't know, maybe can we do this? And they just hammer it out themselves.
Yeah.
And but it was different. It's unique, right? John at that time was in the middle of growing his family that ended up of being 6 children, and John's a very stable, homebody type guy, and he didn't want to have to move his family around, and he didn't want to have to put kids in different schools and all of that. So for him, a lot of it was, hey, if you're just fair with me and what I think makes sense, I don't have to get paid more money than Gary Payton. I'm just using that as a hypothetical.
Yeah.
I just have to feel like you value me for what I bring and what I think is fair. And if we can come to an agreement like that, then we're all good,
Yeah.
And so those are different approaches, different guys, But it would have, if and when to answer your question, if it had never gotten to any kind of a point of that nature, in my opinion, it would have never gotten by Larry. Larry would have never. He would have said, no, you guys go back in the room, close the door, figure it out, because I'm not doing that.
Do I remember, and I may just be, I could be making this up, could be a figment of my imagination, but something in my mind is triggering a memory of a potential Carl to Dallas thing at one point that may have been talked about. I don't know how serious that was, or maybe it was just a rumor a long time ago.
I don't remember that, Spencer. The thing I do remember is going way back to the beginning of it. In the draft, in Carl's draft in '85, we all believed that Dallas picking 6 was going to take Carl because he was a so-called local guy from Louisiana Tech, was only like 3 hours from Dallas, and we thought that was where he was going to go in the draft. And then when he didn't, and then he went by 9 and 10, then we thought, well, there's a chance he might get to us at 13. And again, he was just a guy on the list of all these other guys. And then Washington took Kenny Green from Wake Forest at 12. And I remember Scott looked at his dad, Coach Layden, and the general manager also at the time, and said, well, we got to take the Malone kid from Louisiana Tech. And I remember Frank said, are you sure? Is there something wrong? Because you said he was going to go 5, 6, 7. And now he's here at 13. So is there something we don't know, like he has a bad knee or he's a bad guy or something that we don't know? And I remember Scott said, well, no, we don't. I don't have any of that info, and I haven't heard any of those things, but he's too good a talent not to take him at 13 and then just, hope for the best kind of thing. And Frank goes, okay, all right, I hope you're right.
And he was right.
I hope you're right.
And he was right. The rest is history. Yeah, I don't know why I remember that rumor surfacing at some point. But anyway, yesterday's news. All right, we already talked about what the Jazz did do. Smitty gave us a good breakdown on K.J. Martin, the only actual tangible piece that remained, as P.J. Tucker has been moved on twice, and think our guy landed in Orlando. Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably not an NBA player, no longer on the roster. And then Mo Bamba was waived. So K.J. Martin, Josh Richardson also waived. So K.J. Martin's the only tangible piece the Jazz brought in. They have 5 second-round picks in their back pocket and an unprotected first from Phoenix in 2031. All right, every day it was like John Collins is getting traded. Every day I heard some sort of John Collins to Sacramento, John Collins this, John Collins that. John Collins, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, they were Jazzmen yesterday, and they're Jazzmen today after 1 o'clock Mountain Time.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I thought they played really hard last night.
They did. It was a fun game, yeah.
You know, and it looked like to me like, oh, these guys know that this is a tryout.
Yeah.
For somebody.
Clarkson
right?
goes
like,
for 30 play. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but it didn't work out that way. My guess, and I don't know anything, Spence, about it, but it would make sense to me if we assume that the Jazz are trying to move a couple of those guys just because they don't fit the timeline they're on, to maybe if they could get some assets, then they would also save some money. They probably were asking for whatever it was that just either didn't work out with another team that you know maybe didn't value them as much, but it also could have been just logistics where maybe another team said, oh, we'd like John Collins, but we can't figure out a way to fit him into $25 million because we don't have that. We don't have that space. We're over the cap. We're into the luxury tax, whatever it is. And the only guy we can trade back to you is Spence Checketts, who never gets off the bench, who also happens to be making $25 million.
I'm making $25 million in this scenario? I like it.
Yeah, and so, you know, and the Jazz go, well, Spence Checketts, what are we going to do with him? You know,
you don't have to put it in that conversation.
Whatever, you know,
and say I never got off the bench.
They say that anyway.
That's fair. I wish I could argue with that.
But anyway, so they probably had discussions. It either didn't work out because of what the Jazz were being offered to come back. I don't know if that would really be a big inhibitor, to be honest, because I think it would be more better for them long range to move on from those guys in terms of roster construction, but probably logistics where the teams they're talking to just didn't have any wiggle room to make a move happen, because if you're over the salary cap, then you have to trade dollar for dollar, so you'd have to trade somebody who's making equal amount of money, and probably just didn't make sense for the Jazz. And so my guess, and it's just that, is at the end of the day, they ran that around the circle several times, came up with nothing, and so now we just move on.
All right, one more question here regarding what the Jazz did not do, because there are a lot of Jazz fans, and look, it's always interesting to consider the level of functional NBA knowledge in a fan base. I think most fans just want to go watch a damn game. And they don't give a rip about the mid-level. Your second apron means you can't sign a player for $12.8 million. They don't care about that stuff, right? Yep. And I think we have a lot of basketball fans in this market that are wondering, okay, like Luka, De'Aaron Fox, Brandon Ingram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 7 or 8, difference-making pieces were moved at this deadline, and these fans are looking at a team that at times it's fun to watch because they're young and they play hard and they get all that stuff and they know the deal, I suppose. But for a Jazz fan out there is going, wait, we're not very good. And it seems to me one or more of these pieces would have made us a lot better right away. Why didn't the Jazz do anything that actually provides immediate, tangible value? What do you say to that Jazz fan today?
Well, first of all, you have to have – it takes 2 to tango, and sometimes 3 or 4. Teams to work out a deal. I'm sure the Jazz called because your responsibility is to make all those calls and to make sure you're in the loop on whatever's going on with other teams. Are you trying to do you want Brandon Ingram? Do you like him at that number? He's going to be a free agent this summer. You're only going to trade for him if you think that you can re-sign him and because you like him and you can keep him on your roster, but it's going to take a good chunk of money to do that. De'Aaron Fox, that kind of thing is interesting to me because I don't know in this day and age how a player says, I want to be traded and I want you to trade me to team A, and then your team figures out a way to trade you to team A. Like, I don't know how you get to call that shot and that's what happens. But okay, however that happened. But again, Sacramento had to have a third team come in, and they had to have somebody, and they were able to get Zach LaVine in, right? So they go, well, if this guy's not going to re-sign with us in a year and a half, then, we got to get something now. We don't want to do it. They didn't want to trade De'Aaron Fox. Believe me, he's a linchpin of their team. He's a big-time player for them. But if that's what it's going to be, we have to get out in front of it. So, okay, how are we going to do that? They figure out someday. They call everybody. Do you guys want in? We're trying to figure this out. And when the dust settles, they end up bringing back a very good player in Zach LaVine, who's having a career year this year at age 29. So he's right in his prime. And they get something that's tangible, that's very good, on a similar par. I don't know if you'd call him the same level player, but pretty close, De'Aaron Fox and Zach LaVine. And so they get something for it. And, the Jazz, who are they offering to make something like that happen? They get a team where they can trade a bunch of draft picks, but those kind of teams, whether it was, Dallas, whether it was the Lakers, who believe they're good enough to make some noise, whether it's Golden State, who believes they're good enough to make some noise, Sacramento, who wants to get back in the mix of trying to make some noise. So those teams aren't going to take a bunch of draft picks because it doesn't help them now. And so that's what happens in that regard. So you're not helping a team get higher up on the ladder by giving them a bunch of draft picks or trade assets. So that doesn't help them. So now what does help them? Well, we'd like to, can we talk about Lauri Markkanen? We just signed Lauri. And by the way, they can't trade Lauri Markkanen until this summer, so that's wasn't even an option for the Jazz. So now you're talking about whatever players someone else would want. So all those things become complicated. Spence, a lot of it has to do with salaries and matching salaries and teams that are over the cap, which most teams are, which means you have to trade one for one, which becomes difficult in itself. And a lot of those kinds of moving parts just make it really untenable. Look, you look at the other teams that are waddling in the bottom, right? Whether it's Charlotte, whether it's Washington, maybe Portland is also kind of in that group as well. No players went to any of those teams because the teams that are trading those level players aren't getting from those teams what they need to keep their momentum moving forward. And so that's why you see these guys going to other teams. Now, the Ingram thing is interesting to Toronto because Toronto is one of those so-called rebuilding teams, but they probably have some kind of a understanding that they like Ingram enough that they're going to work something out with him in free agency to re-sign him and have him be part of their group with Scotty Barnes and those guys going forward. So, that might be a different deal, but that also involves the agents and, who's negotiating stuff behind the scenes and a lot of those kinds of things that also come into play.
All right, Smitty, before I set you loose, in your opinion, what is the greatest trade in Utah Jazz history? And there are a couple of trades that could manifest themselves as the greatest trades that are still going on, namely Gobert and Mitchell. We'll have to see how that turns out. Adrian Dantley for Spencer Haywood, way back in the day. There have been a lot of the Darren trade, trades that brought draft capital. It turned into Darren Williams and Gordon Hayward. I tend to think it's the Hornacek deal just because that's what put the team over the hump into the finals. But you were there 40 years. Best, most consequential trade in the history of the Utah Jazz is what and why?
Well, I would say in two different pieces, Spence. The best trade or the most valuable in terms of what you got back was Adrian Dantley. Because Adrian Dantley led the NBA in scoring several years, gave the Jazz some legitimacy in the early 80s with Darryl Griffith, and Frank Layden was able to put those guys together and build a team from there with Thurl Bailey, with Mark Eaton, with Bobby Hansen, with John Stockton, with Karl Malone, that then became a good competitive team. Now they're off and running. The most consequential trade, in my opinion, I agree with you, for one of the few times that we ever agree on anything, was the Jeff Hornacek trade for Jeff Malone. Jeff Malone, a very good player, was very good for the Jazz for 3 years, but getting Jeff Hornacek, what he brought to the floor, but also what he brought to the locker room and who he was in terms of bringing the group, helping to bring the group together even more so. Under Carl and John's player leadership, now you got a guy who can come and get that third guy who can score for you, who will compete, who's smart, who knows what's going on, and he came at the right time with the right group and propelled that team, to the greatest heights that the Jazz franchise has had during his years here. So that has to be considered the most consequential trade.
I agree. Smitty, great to see you. Good stuff today. Enjoy. Oh, Super Bowl. Who you got? Real quick.
Super Bowl.
Who you got? Gotta
Who
give
else?
me a pick. You got the Chiefs.
Are the Jets in it?
No,
the Jets are in it.
That's rude. They missed out again this year, just barely. You got the Chiefs?
Probably.
All right, my friend. Great to see you, okay?
Thanks, Matt.
The great Richard Smith. Keep it right here. More on the other side on ESPN 700. All right, we're going to do some NFL coming up. We'll get you ready for Super Bowl 59, which, by the way, is on our radio station. So we'll do that coming up with our good friend from Sumer Sports. It's Sean Syed. We got Sports Court today as well. Hour in studio with Smitty, so some good stuff. Andy Larson hopped by as well. But welcome in a very special guest live in studio. So Valentine's Day is right around the corner. Now, you've heard me talk to and about our new friends at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. We are still honoring the 25% off of laser treatments, and Dr. Michael Hadley, who I call the dermatologist, stopped by live in studio last week and gave you guys a great offer. If you are like me, you are out in the sun as much as possible. You're golfing, you're hiking. Even when the sun is not out in the winter, you're probably skiing. And if you have not had a comprehensive check of essentially your entire body, you're in danger is what it comes down to. So Dr. Michael Hadley offered a free skin consultation, 20% off their new zinc sunscreen formula as well. So we got those deals that we're honoring, but we're going to give you a very special deal now for Valentine's Day. I call her CP, Christine Packard, live in studio. Christine, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Get a little closer to that microphone. There you go. Thank you so much for rolling into studio. So Jason's deal, 25% off laser treatments. We're honoring that. Michael's deal, free skin consultation. You've got to take advantage of that because if you have not been checked and you're out in the sun a lot, early detection can literally save your life. You've got a deal for our listeners that can help them out with Valentine's Day. Christine, let's hear about it.
Yeah, I've got the fun stuff to talk about. We're offering 20% off Botox for your listeners for Valentine's Day.
So Botox for people, for the uninitiated, because we have a lot of men listeners that probably need to buy things for their female partners. Why is Botox beneficial for the women that you see, and why should our male listeners take advantage of this deal for their partners?
Well, Botox is technically a neurotoxic toxin that paralyzes muscle, which sounds scary, but in reality, it's relaxing your muscle, so it prevents your muscles from moving, creating these wrinkles. It's not a filler, so we're not injecting something to create volume. This is actually a treatment and a preventative for wrinkles.
Okay, so it's like an anti-aging thing, essentially.
It can be.
And women and men both use it, right?
Absolutely.
And it just essentially, as you age a little bit, it helps you kind of look younger. I mean, is that as basic as we can put it outside of your scientific terms?
That's pretty true.
Okay.
Yes.
And a 20% savings.
20% off, yes.
But you have to call today for Valentine's Day. Talk about the process of what the Botox entails. Coming in, what's it like, how long does it take, et cetera?
So we typically will do a consultation. We like to know if there's any specific areas that you would like to have treated that you don't like or that you want to improve. I would say for most people, they don't like forehead lines, wrinkles between the eyes, wrinkles around the eyes. So we kind of go over what that entails. Botox is an injection.
Okay.
So it's pretty minor. I mean, it doesn't hurt too badly. It's several little needle pokes, and then effects of Botox you'll probably start to see within 3 to 7 days. It's temporary, which can be good or bad, but it lasts around 3 months.
So at what age, generally speaking, and I guess it could be anybody, quite frankly, but generally speaking, the patients that you see for Botox, what's kind of the age range?
I mean, we see people of all ages. I mean, women as young as in their 20s want to come in and have it done mostly as a preventative. They're like, I know this wrinkle happens when I make this gesture, and I don't want that. Because over time, that can become a resting wrinkle.
Okay, so 20% off Botox. It's a Valentine's Day special. You guys should take advantage of this right now. In addition to a free skin consultation, if you are a golfer, a hiker, or a skier, and you have not had this consultation, you could be in danger. Early detection can save your life. So here's the number. It's 801-657-5664. 801-657-5664. 801-657-5664. You can visit HadleyDermatology.com. So again, and Christine will end on this, away from the Botox, but that's the deal. For Valentine's Day, get your significant other 20% off a Botox treatment. She'll love it. I can promise you that. But I wanted to ask you about why early detection, if you have an issue with your skin, because it's like I was telling you before, whenever I see Jason, he knows I'm golfing all the time. He's like, dude, we need to get you in. So I try to pop in there once a year just to make sure I'm good. What can early detection do for the potential ramifications of long-term health for people that haven't been checked?
it can prevent things from getting worse. Like if we see any spots that we can treat non-surgically, then that prevents it from going on and becoming a big surgery. You don't want to have to see the dermatologist for a big procedure.
You do not want to see him. Let's stop you before you have to see Michael.
So yeah, coming in sooner and having a screening, being preventative, and finding out things to do to take that even further, what you can do on your own to prevent it is really helpful.
Well, look, it is great to see you as always.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. That's Christine.
Me.
Oh, absolutely. Christine from Hadley Dermatology. So it's Ogden Clinic, Hadley Dermatology. I'll reset the offers once again. 25% off laser treatments. So the weather's about to get warm. You don't want to be the guy at the pool that takes his shirt off and looks like a gorilla. So let's get that taken care of. 25% off. Free skin consultation if you are a person that is in the sun a lot. Now, the Valentine's Day special that Christine just dropped is you get 20% off of Botox for your significant other. So, guys, don't blow it. Pick up the phone and take advantage of these offers at 801-657-5664. That's 801-657-5664. 801-657-5664. Visit HadleyDermatology.com. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Sean Syed joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Been a wild 72 hours in the world of pro basketball, and obviously with the Jazz being as active as they've been, that has dominated much of the conversation today, and we'll get back to it later on. But I believe there's an American football game on Sunday, Porter, that we have not talked about yet. I haven't checked the schedule, but is that your understanding as well?
That is the case, of course. I think like 10 hours of it you can hear on this here radio station if you don't happen to be down in the city of New Orleans, like our next guest.
Yes, indeed. Super Bowl 59 in the Big Easy. Our next guest, Sean Syed from Sumer Sports. Good enough to give us some time on a Thursday. Sean, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's been a lot of fun to be down in New Orleans. You know, on Radio Row, you got all these former players, you got all these current players, all talking about a game that I think is going to be a lot of fun on Sunday.
I agree with you. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to ask you the question this way right out of the gates. The Philadelphia Eagles win Super Bowl 59 if what, Sean?
If Jalen Hurts is able to make three throws. I think that is really what it's going to come down to, where we've seen how Jalen Hurts has played in a Super Bowl previously. We've seen Jalen Hurts play his best game of maybe the last two seasons against the Commanders, and I think they're going to find themselves in a situation where they are able to run the ball on that Kansas City defense the way the Buffalo Bills were able to run the ball on them. And you think about the Eagles defense against the Bills, or compared with the Bills defense, the Eagles defense is better, and the Bills defense made the stops they needed to potentially win that game. So for me, it really just comes down to I need three good throws from Jalen Hurts, and the Eagles fans are going to go home real happy.
Man, I think you can get three good throws from Jalen Hurts, can't you? That doesn't seem like too much to ask, Sean.
You know, I certainly think so. I think maybe three good throws in the biggest moment on those late drives in the fourth quarter. So make it maybe a little bit more specific. I do think the Chiefs are going to do a good job of, instead of just playing a ton of man coverage and letting you play one-on-one with A.J. Brown, they're going to get into some of their more funky zone pressure looks where Hurts is going to have to think a second or a third time. And, you know, if you're not able to make some of those tight window decisions, it's going to be a tough day for the Eagles.
The Kansas City Chiefs win Super Bowl 59, Sean, if what?
I think as long as they're not beating themselves. You know, the Chiefs this season, it's been an interesting ride where earlier in the year, you know, some struggles, but as of late, I think they've done a good job getting the ball out quick. I think that a big thing in this game is going to be if their offensive line is beating themselves, where you have Milton Williams or Jalen Carter over that left guard spot. You have Jawan Taylor at the right tackle spot where you might have some issues with Nolan Smith. So I think if they play their game in the way that they have been able to play over the last 2 weeks, as they've been, you know, removing the stench of, oh, this team is just not good even though they keep winning games, I think it really is, you know, things favor them, and they have to be able to play a clean game.
Read earlier today, you know, Vic Fangio causes a lot of chaos for a lot of teams, a lot of quarterbacks, but I read that Mahomes is 8-0 against him, which I did not know until this morning. What does that say to you, Sean?
You know what? When you look at it at the surface, it's like, oh, wow, that is a really big eye-popping thing. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you look back to, while he was with the Broncos, you look at who are the quarterback of some of those Broncos teams, you see that, you know, you take out some special teams touchdowns, he's only letting up like 20 points a game in a lot of those situations. I think you'd probably be happy with that. For the Eagles, if you think back to last year when Fangio was with the Dolphins, I thought that international game, Fangio had a really good game plan for dealing with Travis Kelce, finding ways to bracket him from both sides and really take him out of the game at a few different moments. So for me, you know, I hear that. I see that. I think this Eagles defense is so much more talented than some of the teams that he's played with. I think that the Eagles offense is also going to be able to keep up in a way that some of those offenses that Fangio had on side of him, just they weren't able to do it. So it's a big one. I think it maybe gives Fangio a little bit of extra fuel for this game.
A lot of people have surmised, not just this week, but over the course of really the entire season, that Howie Roseman has built the best roster in all of pro football. I wonder, Sean, do you agree with that? And does the best roster mean that you have the best team?
I absolutely agree with it. I think it's even further than that, where he's really the guy that hired Fangio. That's a huge thing to bring that in there. And you look up and down the roster where, I mean, Howie kind of almost whiffed a little bit on that Bryce Huff pick so far, at least for 1 year, the signing there. And you're still able to hit on all of these players like a Zach Bond in that situation, like Quinyon Mitchell, like Cooper DeJean. So that's been super positive for Howard Roseman. I do think it's the best roster in the NFL. Candidly, I do think it's the best team in the NFL as well. I think they are better than the Chiefs. We'll obviously be able to see on Sunday. The problem is, as everyone knows, you got Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid on that other sideline.
Is this the best team the Chiefs have played during this great Mahomes-Andy Reid Super Bowl run in the Super Bowl?
You know, that is a good one. That, of course, the Buccaneers team that they lost to was a really, really good team. So I think that is the one that you're kind of going up against, where the Bucs had such fun on defense. Although from just a roster up and down perspective, I think it's the best constructed roster. It's just, again, like that quarterback, I feel like I lean towards rather having Tom Brady, even with the Buccaneers, than Jalen Hurts with the Eagles.
Is there a coaching mismatch? You know, Andy Reid played his college ball locally here at Brigham Young, about 40 miles south as the crow flies, and he has a chance to put himself on a very, very short list. And, you know, as we referenced, it does seem like Nick Sirianni, the narrative surrounding him is he has the best roster in football, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not he's the type of coach that can go head-to-head against Andy in a game like this. Do you feel like there's a coaching mismatch on Sunday?
I do think that, you know, you'd certainly rather have Andy Reid. At the same time, the last time that these guys played in that Super Bowl 2 years ago, you know, Sirianni had a fourth down decision where he ended up punting instead of going for it. I think Sirianni is going to learn from that. I think he's going to be pretty aggressive in this game and put them in an advantageous situation. And, I mean, you know, whatever you think of Sirianni, he just keeps on finding ways to win these games. It does seem like there's some intangible value with how he has players associating to each other in the locker room and finding comfort in that way. So even if I would probably prefer to have Andy Reid just in terms of what he brings to a football team, it feels like Sirianni is still the right guy for this Eagles roster.
I'm not going to ask you if this is the best Chiefs team that we've seen with Mahomes and Reid in this run, but I will ask you to characterize what type of team you believe it to be. You know, what superlative adjective? Is it wily? Is it veteran? Is it crafty? I don't think it's the best or most talented, but what is your opinion on the type of team this version of the Chiefs are?
It is a brutally efficient team. It really is, where these third downs that they just keep on finding ways to convert that other teams are not able to. It's brutal, but as a defense, looking at it and thinking, oh, man, you haven't been in a positive situation. Mahomes is able to figure it out. So that's the really way that I think about them on offense. On defense, I do think they're pretty opportunistic, where you're going to get some weird blitz look like Josh Allen faced on that last fourth down in the AFC Championship game. And if you're not able to block it up, if you're not able to be comfortable, you are not going to be able to win that game.
So, you know, the noise around Jalen is fair and understandable, but it's also somewhat interesting. When these two teams played in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, he accounted for like 375 yards and 4 touchdowns, 304 yards through the air. And for me, and I want you to break this down for me, Sean, it just feels like they just prefer to play the way that they've played, and they don't need or want him to go for 350 and 4. They would like that. I'm not sure it's, you know, safe to say they wouldn't want that. But are the criticisms of him a little unfair based off of just the dominant ground game they have, or are there things to really criticize Jalen Hurts about?
I think when we look at just quarterbacks in general, you know, everyone has their ideal type of quarterback. Some people like the old school drop back, that kind of quarterback. Some people want a quarterback that can move around. I think a lot of times we look at it as when the clock is ticking down, are you going to lead an offense down the field through the air? And Hurts has not had to do that this season. You know, there's just been times where you can find a huge explosive run from Saquon Barkley. I do think some of the criticisms that I hear a little bit better are the ones where, you know, is Jalen throwing into tight windows? But at the same time, it feels like that Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator has prioritized, just don't turn the ball over. We're going to be able to run over teams. If we throw interceptions, we're going to be set back. And I watched their film the entire season. I keep picking out specific moments. You throw an in-breaker into zone coverage against the Ravens. You're able to make successful throws against the Commanders. And so he has it in him. I know he has it in him. And I would love for us to just see it on the Super Bowl stage again, where, as he said, he's done it once before, just not in a win. If he's able to do it again, he's able to win that game. I think it really changes the way that people look at Jalen Hurts.
The Saquon effect. You know, I always push back on narratives that seem to seep into kind of unanimous feel. And the whole like, hey, the running back position is dead. No, it's not. And the whole like, hey, the running back position is back. No, it never went anywhere. But when you have the elite guys, the Derrick Henrys, the Saquon Barkleys, there will always be a place for elite backs. And there's always room at the top. I think that was an old James Webster quote or something. But what is the Saquon Barkley effect? Break this down for us, because Super Bowl a couple years ago, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, but most of the rushing came from Jalen. And obviously the Saquon effect changes them. How do you articulate what the Saquon Barkley effect is?
Saquon Barkley is a home run hitter. There are going to be times where he hits singles and he hits doubles, but it feels like, you know, Barry Bonds during his record-setting run, it's just so hard to contain him snap after snap, where, you know, you want to stuff the box, you want to have a bunch of players there near that line of scrimmage. If he breaks your first level, he's just gone. So for him to be that level of player in a just part of NFL history where, look, it is a passing league. You win games by passing the ball, but the Eagles have such a good offensive line. They have such a good run game that they don't always need it. And it's just the entire season has been a back and forth. Are they going to be able to figure it out? Are they going to be able to figure it out? And it doesn't matter up until this point because they're here, but they are going to have to, I think, figure it out at least one time against the Kansas City Chiefs.
He did not break Eric Dickerson's single-season record. Probably could have, but sat out the final game. But he is 30 yards away from breaking Terrell Davis's single-season record for combined rushing yards in the regular season and the playoffs. Sean, if he goes for 100-plus and they win, is there a case to be made that we've just witnessed the greatest season from a running back in the history of pro football?
I think there's a really strong case, and it's absolutely, I think, what I would say, even though I understand, it's not the regular season record. It is maybe one or two more games just based on having more games in the regular season. This offense is successful because Saquon Barkley makes incredible cuts in really tight spaces. He's such a large physical force. You see him moving around, but the way that he is so nimble in those short areas, that's been so fun. I think we are just so lucky to see it. And look, when you look at the last, 10, 15 Super Bowls, not a ton of guys are going over 100 rushing yards, but I would like nothing more than to see Saquon go for 150 and have him being the one that's raising that Super Bowl MVP trophy.
Steve Spagnuolo, deservedly so, has received a lot of credit for this iteration of the Chiefs' run, with the defense being as dominant, if not more so at times, than the offense. Tell me, Sean, how the Chiefs defense, either personnel or schematically, how do they go about their business of trying to limit this ground game in Saquon Barkley?
I think you throw resources at the problem. You put a bunch of big bodies inside. You try and force them. Maybe if it's a read type play, you force Jalen Hurts to be the one to keep it. You do what you can to prevent Saquon from having that sort of attacking vertical style. I think the tough part is, though, you also have to worry about Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So if you want to keep two high safeties, you want to keep obviously cornerbacks out there. Now you only have 7 players in the box. That might be a situation where I would like the Eagles to attack Chris Jones a little bit in the run game early on. See how many snaps he wants to keep on playing. See how is he going to have the stamina late in the game to be able to rush the passer. So, I don't love the matchup, particularly from that run game perspective, but I think when you get to those pass situations, that's when things start to turn a little bit more for the Chiefs.
Reference the record that Mahomes has against Fangio. You were good to kind of dig a little bit deeper as to what that is all about. And what has impressed me the most, Sean, and then I'll kind of cede the time to you, about the Mahomes evolution or growth or what have you, is just his ability to be cerebral and figure out what that game needs and bring it during that game simply just to win, even if it's 3-0. Like, it doesn't matter to them. But does Vic Fangio do something different this time around? Because it does feel like it's a little bit of a pick your poison. Like, what do you try to take away if you're Vic Fangio to at least make Mahomes uncomfortable?
I think a big thing is going to be those throws over the middle of the field, those throws in the flat area, kind of shallow to the outside, where Xavier Worthy has been so much more successful at this point in the season. I do think you're going to get a game where the Chiefs are throwing the ball relatively quickly. They've done that more recently because their offensive line, it just has some tight, tough situations up there. I think for Fangio, as he's continuing to evolve this year, he's playing a little bit of a different coverage than what he's used to. And so I love that growth, even in year 45 of this guy's coaching career. But it feels like you're going to have situations where the Eagles DBs are just going to be a little bit tighter. They're going to take a little bit of that air out of the coverage. They're going to be playing closer to those receivers. So you're forcing, not only Mahomes to make the right choice over and over, you're forcing the offensive line to be able to protect properly over and over. And then you're forcing the receivers, where you've had situations this year where Xavier Worthy just has one of his feet just out of bounds and it ends up in an incompletion. So it might not be, we can beat Patrick Mahomes, but you should, I think, be able to find some other spots along that roster that you're able to take advantage of.
How do you think the Chiefs go about trying to establish their run game? Pacheco, I don't know if he's healthy or what. When he's right, he's as violent of a runner as there is in pro football. But since he came back from the injury, he just does not look the same. And they signed Kareem Hunt, obviously, who was with them a number of years ago. And I don't know, man, from the eye test over the past few weeks, Kareem looks like the more valid, consistent option out of the backfield. How do you think Kansas City goes about their business of trying to establish a run game?
I think they're not going to try to establish a run game. I think they should throw the ball 75 times to get the ball out quick, obviously, but use that as a way to replace it. Early on against the Bills, you're running those RPOs where it ends up as quick throws kind of over that middle of the field area, sometimes kind of quick out to your right side a lot of times, because I think the Eagles feel pretty comfortable, if the Chiefs want to try and run inside, where the Chiefs usually have your left guard, your center, your right guard playing at a really high level, but their left guard is playing left tackle right now. So I think the Eagles would be more than happy if the Chiefs are trying to kind of establish that run game in any way. It just doesn't feel like what the Kansas City Chiefs' biggest strength is right now.
Now, to your point, if Kansas City does try to do that and they just simply have no success because everything is locked up, do you think we see a different approach, a recalibration? Because, again, like I said, the most impressive thing to me about watching this iteration of the Chiefs is they seem to kind of be exchanging jabs, if we can use the boxing analogy early on, and they're fine to rope-a-dope you and then knock you out in the 10th. So if it starts out, Kansas City trying to do what you're saying, I mean, obviously they got to recalibrate and do something different and find more balance, no?
It's a tough situation when you think about it. I don't think, balance has to be the goal for the Chiefs. I mean, obviously scoring points is going to be the goal for any single offense. I think for them to use quick throws as sort of a replacement for the run game. Now, I'm not saying, hey, don't run the ball at all, right? You want to be able to see if you're able to get in positive looks. The Eagles want to play with lighter bodies on the field overall to deal with the passing game. So maybe you are able to kind of attack that in the run game, and maybe more of, well, who's on the field for a defense, then we can kind of decide to attack that way. It's going to be a big problem for the Eagles if they have to bring out, heavier players. You get an extra linebacker on the field in some of those situations. And now that's the back and forth. I think we'll be able to see that pretty early on in this game.
All right, Sean, before I set you loose, we're not going to have you on prior to the game on Sunday. So I got to know, man. I got to know who you're taking to win the game. I need a final score, and I need your MVP.
I have the Eagles winning 27-24. I think it's going to be a Jalen Hurts MVP, getting that Super Bowl MVP back after losing to the Chiefs previously. I think when I look at that AFC Championship game, the way the Bills could have won that game. They were in a positive situation where you got the stops that you needed to. You're able to run the ball on them. I think the Eagles have a better defense than the Bills. I think the Eagles have a better run game than the Bills. So it's hard for me to look at all of that and think anything other than an Eagles win. I get, you don't get bonus points for picking against Patrick Mahomes. I understand that. But for me, it feels like top to bottom, Eagles have a better roster. I think it's a situation and a matchup that they're going to be able to win here.
Where can people go find your work, Sean?
You can check me out at Syed Schemes on Twitter. I'll be breaking down the game certainly after on a bunch of podcasts talking about things with some kind people like you.
There you go, Sean. Hey, I appreciate the time. Enjoy the game and safe travels and be well, okay?
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
All right, Sean Syed, the Director of Communications for Sumer Sports, our good friends who stop by pretty much on a weekly basis during the pro football season. Super Bowl 59 in the Big Easy will begin coming up on Sunday as my computer refreshes at 4:30 p.m. on Fox. Our pregame coverage and the game and the postgame coverage will give you 10 hours of Super Bowl coverage on Sunday as we are your home of the biggest and the best football events, college and pro, here in the market. Chiefs-Eagles should be a good one. That line has moved. Kansas City is a 1-point favorite, and the over-under is 48.5. All right, before we catch a break on this Thursday, new year, new you, new budget, save money on your wireless, on your internet, on your cable television as well. All three things on the table. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Just that easy. And the amount of savings right now is massive. Call us up, take advantage of these deals. We've got this neat offer with Netflix. This is, one of those many providers that's raised their rates. Well, we have a reprieve for that. If you get set up with Dish, not only do we get the Dish promotion and a price guarantee, so it'll be cheaper than all the other services you're using, but you get Netflix free for the next 2 years. Guys, that's $431 plus in your pocket just by taking advantage of that offer. And you get a bigger DVR. You'll have all the streaming apps built in. You can have access to all the content in one place. And we'll have you installed for free and throw in dinner at JCW's. Call us up. Take advantage of the deals. Lower your bill. Be one of the customers that we've had this week. I've had a handful of them that are in the $3,000-$4,000 range that we're able to save, and it's insane how much money is out there to be saved between home phone, internet, and even the mobile phone service. Call us today. Upgrade. And also, if you when you call us up, we do a little extra homework, too, because we know Dish sends out about 60,000 of these individual gift card offers. A lot of people just throw them away. They don't even notice they're there. But we'll check and see if you've got one. If you got one, we can apply that also. And we're about 60%, I think, right now of other customers that call in actually have a gift card, too. So call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Time now for our PGA Tour Golf Leaderboard Update, brought to you by Uinta Golf. Check out the website, which is worldwidegolfshops.com. Location here in Salt Lake is 560 East, 2100 South. They're also in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. And right now, they've got the new TaylorMade QI30. 5 woods are the 4th generation of carbon wood technology. The driver unlocks a new level of distance at Uinta Golf, so check them out. The Waste Management Phoenix Open is going on, where folks like to get very, very loose and enjoy a little golf. At TPC Scottsdale, it's the stadium course, and Wyndham Clark is still on the course, and he is absolutely just taking this golf course to task. He's raking 600 par through 14. Taylor Moore, 600 par through 13. Justin Thomas in the clubhouse with a 66, and that's good for 500 par, along with Nikolai Højgaard. Andrew Putnam, Lee Hodges also at 500. A lot of good names on this golf course on the leaderboard. Some notables: Adam Schenk is 400 par. Jordan Spieth, 300 par, as is Kurt Kitayama. Camilo Villegas is 300 par as well. Webb Simpson at 300. I don't think Tony is playing, Tony Finau, which is odd because he likes this event. Obviously, he played last week, but I don't see his name on the leaderboard. Peter Malnati is 200 par, as is Ben Martin. If we scroll down a little bit, some of the better golfers really struggling, namely Max Homa, who has five over par, is second to last. And I saw earlier Ricky was struggling too. Yeah, Ricky Fowler at 3 over as well. So some big names struggling. Joel Damon at 2 over par. But right now, Wyndham Clark looks like he's got his form today. 600 par through 14 holes at the Waste Management Phoenix Open down in Scottsdale at their stadium course. All right, we'll do a little sports court coming up next. Then we'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program on a Thursday right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday right about now with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. How's it going?
All good here. Appreciate your time as always. Let's jump right into it. Justin Tucker finds himself in more hot water. Four more massage therapists have accused him of what is being characterized as, quote, inappropriate behavior. Of course, we dealt with this for a long time with Deshaun Watson. Fill us in. What's the latest here?
Yeah, Spence. Justin Tucker kind of came out of, kind of shocked everybody. Justin Tucker, who potentially is the greatest place kicker in the history of the NFL. He had kind of a rough season, but his season just got a little rougher when first came out 4, 6, 9. Last I heard 10 massage therapists, and I don't know if it's I think it's at various gyms have accused him of inappropriate sexual behavior. So that's what we know now. And then he's got an attorney, and they've come out and unequivocally denied everything. Again, there's 10 right now that are alleging this. So what could happen? Right now, no civil lawsuit has been filed. Seized Deshaun Watson, 23, 24, 25, 26 settlements, or whatever it was. But these women, 6 of them have hired a law firm. I thought maybe we'd see our guy Tony Busby up because he has the playbook on this. So if something civil does happen, all of these need to prove their damages, what they're alleging, what their emotional distress, the effects of the allegations are, and potentially criminal investigation. I think we haven't heard about that yet. Deshaun Watson, as we know, went to 2 grand juries, and neither of them decided to indict him. But that could happen. As we always see, the NFL investigates these things. NFL they kind of play this slow. You know, they want to see what comes out and all the allegations. They come out with their statements that they take it seriously. As we know, in Deshaun, he was suspended 11 games, I think, and fined $5 million. So they're looking into it. Potentially the Ravens, they say they're looking into it. Another thing that could happen, as we see, is, you know, he's got several endorsement contracts where he earns a lot of money through endorsements and sponsoring certain things. He could lose. One of them has come out already and talking about canceling him. He could lose those endorsement contracts, and there it gets into issues of, are they justified in canceling those? There's probably issues of conduct that allow them to do that. So we're just on the precipice of this right now and don't know exactly what's going to happen. I wouldn't be shocked if there's more allegations and more massage therapists come out. But, you know, when there's smoke, there's fire.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
Well, I agree with Preston. I think we're going to see civil lawsuits come from this, and I'm going to bet we do see Tony Busby on these cases. I mean, we've seen this movie before, so even though some of these allegations come from back in, I think, 2015 and 16, I think certainly we have not heard the end of this, and there will be some civil suits.
All right, our next story also features men behaving badly. The former president of the Spanish Soccer Federation is about to go on trial, accused of sexual assault for kissing Jenny Hermoso after Spain's victory at the Women's Cup. The final in 2023, I think we all remember that. It was a viral moment. So fill us in. What's the latest here?
Yeah, it was a viral moment, and here we are a year and a half later, and I think it's actually day 4 right now of the trial that's happening in Spain. So Jenny Hermoso, I mean, she's one of the veteran, decorated players on the Spanish women's team who won the World Cup. And as the players were going up afterwards to get their medals and, kind of going across there to get their, shake hands and give hugs and everything else, Luis Rubiales, he's the president of he was the former president of the Spanish Soccer Federation. He's hugging all the players and grabs Jenny Hermoso and kisses her on the lips. And so he, it was a firestorm. He said this is a witch hunt, and essentially his defense is that the kiss was consensual. And so he's been charged with sexual assault and coercion. The coercion part of this is after this happened and it started to go viral, there was the allegation is, a pressure campaign put on Jenny Hermoso to basically, film a video or make a statement with Rubiales to say that the kiss was consensual. And so she did not do that. And so that's what's happening. She's testified. She was on the stand apparently for about 3 hours. Prosecutors are asking for a 2.5-year prison sentence, $50,000 fine, and that he would be banned from participating in sports in this nature in the future.
All right, Preston, you're up, bud.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Garrett hit that good, but there were 3 other officials kind of with that team that were charged. They were charged with coercion and kind of pressuring her to back off this stuff. But it's a different system, and what I think is really interesting, we talk about the Deshaun Watson or the Justin Tucker potential of people bringing civil lawsuits, meaning they will actually sue Justin Tucker or they sued Deshaun Watson, claiming that they've suffered damages and they're seeking some type of damages or go to trial and prove it to a jury. But here, he was prosecuted. I mean, it was a criminal prosecution. I don't think I knew that till now, and it's a trial. He was prosecuted, and I think they're talking about bringing witnesses in, her brother, to talk about her damages, you know, what she suffered through. She talks about public humiliation, and she can't go anywhere without being shamed. But maybe Garrett can hit on this, but I thought in addition to potentially 2.5 years jail time, I thought the $51,000 was potentially they were seeking as compensation for her, which is really interesting if that's what's happening.
You got anything there, Garrett?
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, not clear to me either, Preston. I'm not totally sure in the Spanish system how they're doing that.
All right, fair enough. All right, over to another situation. Look, we have some data. I don't know if you guys saw this. $143 billion gambled on sports by American citizens this year. Prior to 2020, when this started to become a reality, that number was about $4 billion. So that's where we're at. And it's just, you know, I'm not an alarmist about most things, but this just can't end well. And now we have another athlete who's under a federal probe for alleged illegal sports gambling scheme, and it's Terry Rozier, who's now with the Heat. Guys, fill us in. What's going on here?
Yeah, Spence, and the reason you bring this up is there's so much money going on and so much at stake. There are groups out there, and this one is U.S. Integrity, that are watching this stuff closely. And Terry Rozier he was looked at by the NBA, and they didn't see anything, but he's being investigated as a federal probe, and the probe is a big wide net. I think they're looking at a lot of things, and he's being investigated. And the thing that caught their eye is that there were an unwarranted or kind of unusual, inconsistent number of wagers on Terry Rozier, and that some of his play was spotty, it was inconsistent, and there's even an allegation that his play was altered. And so he hasn't been charged criminally, has not been sued civilly, sometimes where people lose a lot of money for people doing this stuff. We know about the Jonte Porter issue, and none of this has happened yet, but the federal investigators are becoming really strong in this area. They don't have to worry about the NBA does. They get to do this themselves to see if a crime has actually been committed. So Jonte Porter, as we know, has been banned from the league for life, and he has faced a criminal prosecution, and I think I heard that he is awaiting sentencing. So stay tuned here, Terry Rozier. I didn't even know he was still in the league, but
he barely is. Yeah, he's not very good anymore. All right, Garrett, you're up, buddy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in that game in March 2023, he played the first 9 minutes and like 30 seconds, and then went out of the game with citing a foot injury or foot issue, and then really didn't play again that season. I'd be curious to know if we're going to, as part of this investigation, do they look at his medical records and, to look at whether or not this is a legitimate foot injury. But yeah, I mean, there's going to need to be some serious consequences for this, because this is going to be a growing and continuing problem.
Moving over to a story that we have covered, but it has a new twist. The San Jose State volleyball team, I believe they had 7 matches forfeited this year. The controversy over a transgender player. But there's a new twist this week, which I did not know about. Looks like the women's team is suing their own coach. Fill us in. What's going on here?
Yeah, that's some of the latest developments. I mean, the coach was, she had filed a Title IX complaint, and then not soon after that, she was suspended, or I guess another way to put it, her contract was not renewed. And so, yeah, we've talked a bunch of times on Sports Court here about this case, and I mean, just a firestorm with, San Jose State University. Their volleyball teams really entered the national discourse on this issue of transgender athletes. And then, of course, this week, big things happening with this issue. Trump's executive order on, which is a interpretation of Title IX different from the Biden administration's interpretation, which bans transgender athletes, and closely followed up by the NCAA also reiterating that ban. So this issue's getting dealt with at a federal level, and the NCAA is following suit.
All right, Preston, your turn on this one.
Yeah, the follow-up, the thing that hit this week is this gal, she was the assistant coach, Melissa Bates-Smoozet, and she actually filed a Title IX complaint against the school when it came out that there was a conspiracy of this transgender athlete to work with the other team to try and hurt some of their own team. So she filed that, and simultaneous with that, some of the players were filing their lawsuit, which is going along, and she's going to become part of that. And now she's learned that she got suspended for that, and now she's learned that she has been fired or her contract won't be renewed. So I wouldn't doubt seeing that she will be filing a lawsuit for some type of discrimination or not being allowed, First Amendment rights, that type of thing, to speak out. And she's claiming, she was trying to protect the athletes, and Garrett jumped on that their new Title IX potential stuff and transgender laws will be talked about for a while here on Sports Court.
All right, final one for today. Another story that we covered when it broke, and now it looks like there's a settlement. The NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, has reached a settlement over the abuse scandal that emerged back in 2021. Final one for today, guys. What's going on here?
Yes, Spence. In 2021, a bunch of allegations came out from players of long-standing abuse in the range of sexual coercion, unwanted touching, other sexual advances, abuse, intimidation, retaliation. So what happened is federal prosecutors came in and started looking at this, and they finally concluded that there had been a systemic downfall and problems going on. A number of executives were fired or lost their jobs or resigned. Coaches were banned from the league for life. And so now what's coming on is, again, this is a federal investigation and prosecution, not of a person committing a crime, although that could happen with some of the allegations against some of the individuals. This is against the league. And, at first I read a settlement, a $5 million settlement, and I think what the settlement is a fund is being set aside, a restitution fund. And, again, maybe Garrett can clarify this. I don't know if any of the players that have come out that originally instituted this are being compensated, and they could potentially file civil claims. But this is a $5 million, I see it as a fine to the league, setting up this fund for all kinds of things to support a better league and, counseling and better conditions and all kinds of things, and just being on top of this. So that's what's happened now, and it's seen as a real victory.
All right, Garrett, final word is yours.
Well, yeah, there is a federal judge that's overseeing the fund, and so I think they will figure out a way to compensate individual players for what they've gone through. But some of this arises out of it. In the Portland Thorns, their team was at the center of this coach Paul Riley and all these accusations against him, and he's fired by the Portland Thorns and then gets hired by the North Carolina Courage. And so I think this is where you get this issue of a systemic abuse and the league allowing it to happen, is you've got a coach who has complaints against him, go coach for another team, and nothing's done about it. So, this will hopefully be some changes systemically in this league.
All right, gentlemen, before we set you loose for this Thursday, for any of our any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to anybody out there with your legal questions. You can reach us at 801-264-6677 or visit our website, handylawutah.com.
Okay, gentlemen, I appreciate the time today. Have a great weekend, and as always, go Utes.
Thanks, Spence. Go Utes.
Go Utes.
Check them out, Handy and Handy. Any legal questions, they're the greatest dudes. They'll take care of you, so give them a call. Speaking of great dudes, Ryan from the Dish Pros. New year, new you. Save not just a little bit of money. We're talking about real money. Compounded over time can really make a big difference if you're trying to save and get your budget right. So I'm talking wireless. I'm talking internet. I'm talking cable television. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much. And it's so easy. You just call us up and say, hey, this is what I have. This is what I want. and let us see what we can do for you. Great promotions right now, and it's actually cheaper than most of the services out there, or the same price. And I'll tell you, the same price, you know what that equals? That's going to be cheaper because everybody's going to raise their rates. Just like they did on Netflix, you just had a nice rate increase there. YouTube, TV, you got Fubo did a huge rate increase. Of course, cable and DirecTV, guys, these are always happening, and they're going to continue to happen. But you got a promotion that's cheaper than most of those, and it'll also get you a price guarantee, plus free movie channels. We'll throw on dinner at JCW's, and how about this? How about Netflix free for the next 2 years? And yes, Netflix is built into the system. It's like a channel. And if you have Netflix, you're paying for it. And if you didn't know, the rate increase happened. It's 2 years is worth like $430. So free stuff. You get $430 of free Netflix, a brand new equipment, big DVR, lower your bill, and then there might be even a gift card available on top of that. Dish mails out about 60,000 gift cards in the Salt Lake area, and most people don't see them because they just throw away their junk mail. But we have a system where I'll check to see if you got one. And we got like almost a 60% ratio of people that call in. There's a gift card out there we can attach to their promotion. And guys, you combine this with everything, and it's like thousands and thousands of dollars that people will save. Call us up. Great internet options too. Fiber at $35, $45 a month. Listen, if you're in a cable bundle, you know what you're paying. You're paying a lot, and it's just going to go up. Lower it. Get a better system, better DVR, faster, have all the streaming apps built into one system, and get free Netflix. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Time now for your chance to win $1,000 in cash. It's the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff, so a shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Keyword this hour is fortune. Text fortune to 508-777-1000. That's fortune to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us at ESPN 700. All right, the 5 o'clock hour, the drive on a Thursday is next. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time on this Thursday afternoon. Commute home on a Thursday stretch right now. Sunny, about 48 degrees earlier. Cold weather, snowstorms, rainstorms on its way for the weekend. Really cold week next week, but it's been nice to have like a random reminder of what spring feels like, even though it's February this week. And as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. My name is Spence Checketts. I host this program. Porter Larson behind the glass producing the show today, and we have been jam-packed and absolutely busy on this crazy Thursday afternoon as the NBA trade deadline has come and gone. Utah Jazz with a minor move today. Dennis Schroeder is Detroit bound. Dennis Lindsey, former Jazz general manager, among the front office people in Detroit. So Dennis Schroeder goes to Detroit. The Utah Jazz have one player that they have acquired. The Jazz made 5 deals. We'll tell you who the player is. We'll tell you about the deals coming up in just a little bit, then kind of recap the news of the day today. But it is time now for our PGA Tour Uinta Golf Leaderboard Update, brought to you by our good friends at Uinta Golf. Check out the website, which is worldwidegolfshops.com. The address here in Salt Lake is 560 East, 2100 South. They're also in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. Right now, the new G440 Ping driver delivers faster ball speeds. Along with Ping's game-changing forgiveness, the G440 irons are designed for more distance and control at Uinta Golf. So we appreciate them. The Waste Management Phoenix Open is going on right now in Scottsdale at the stadium course. And Wyndham Clark is about to finish his round, and he leads at 7 under par through 17. The afternoon scoring conditions must have been much better than the morning because the 3 leaders are all actually still out on the course. It's Wyndham at 7 under. It's Taylor Moore and Lee Hodges at 6 under par. Justin Thomas and Nicolai Højgaard are in the clubhouse at 5 under par, as is Andrew Putnam. Ashke Bhatia, is also having a great round today. Adam Schenk out on the course as well. No Tony Finau during this tournament, which was surprising to me. Tony has often spoke about how much he enjoys the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Jordan Spieth at 3 under par, so some notables playing some good golf today. Peter Malnati, in addition, Andrew Novak, Webb Simpson at 2 under par. Some really good golfers struggling as Max Homa is near the bottom of the rankings at 5 over par. Brendan Todd is the player who had the worst round one at 8 over par. Lucas Glover, after a nice weekend last weekend at Pebble Beach, is 4 over par as well. And Ricky Fowler at 3 over par. So there you go. The Inside the NBA crew on TNT is currently drafting the All-Star teams. I'm not sure if you knew that's how this was going. You probably don't give a rip anyway. All-Star Weekend, it's a new format. So Team Shaq, Team Kenny, and Team Chuck, they're doing that right now on Turner Sports if you're interested in checking that out. NBA trade deadline came and went at 1 o'clock today. The Utah Jazz, over the course of about 10 days, maybe a little bit more if you go back to that Phoenix Suns deal, have acquired 5 second-round picks. They have acquired 1 unprotected 2031 first-round pick from the Phoenix Suns in the aforementioned deal that saw 3 first-rounders heading the way of the Phoenix Suns, 25, 27, and 29, the least favorable of the Jazz, the Cavs, and the T-Wolves during those 3 draft situations. So K.J. Martin is the lone player that has remained on the Jazz roster after the Jazz sent Dennis Schroeder to Detroit today. The Jazz waived Jalen Hood-Schifino. They waived Josh Martin. They sent on P.J. Tucker. They waived Mo Bamba. P.J. Tucker ended up in Toronto after a brief trade to Miami, and it has been almost impossible to keep track of all this stuff. So K.J. Martin, we'll get to know the new Jazz player a little bit. His father, Kenyon Martin, once upon a time tried to fight Jerry Sloan. He still has lip tattoos on his neck. Might be the worst tattoo in NBA history besides Greg Ostertag's Fred Flintstone calf tattoo. Real thing, kids. You can look it up. K.J. Martin just barely turned 24. And there is a chance the Jazz found themselves a piece to potentially be around here for a while. Now, K.J. Martin is in his 5th season in the NBA, began his career with the Houston Rockets. He was an IMG Academy kid. He was going to go to college to play for Vanderbilt, but went to IMG Academy, really burst on the scene in this showcase while he was at IMG, dropped 37, and a lot of people thought he was ready to play pro basketball. He was a 2nd pick overall. His career averages 9.3 points, 5.4 boards. And then in his 3rd season, he actually started 59 games, played all 82 games for the Houston Rockets, averaged about 13 points, 5.5 rebounds. And then Houston traded him to the Clippers, and then he was part of that massive James Harden trade. and was traded to Philadelphia. Did not really crack Nick Nurse's rotation. But again, 6'6", 215 pounds. His jump shot's a work in progress. He's not a great defensive player, but he will dunk on your head like his dad did. He is a great finisher and can get out on the break. And so he is a player that is somewhat intriguing. Now, I think a lot of people today, I've heard from a lot of people that are wondering why a trade deadline that included the following players changing teams: Luka Doncic to Los Angeles, Anthony Davis to Dallas, De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio, Zach LaVine to Sacramento, Jimmy Butler to Golden State, Brandon Ingram to Toronto, and even Andrew Wiggins to Miami. In addition to a really good player, Cleveland made a really sneaky deal. They grabbed DeAndre Hunter from the Hawks. Looks like Atlanta is, under Quinn Snyder, now breaking things down to build around their young core. Obviously, Trae Young is still there. But DeAndre Jordan, a really good player. Mark Williams has been traded to the Lakers. He is a good young center when he is healthy, and he'll play with LeBron James and Luka Doncic. I know a lot of people wondering why, with all of these players available, the Jazz did not get involved in a add-to situation as opposed to a conduit to help Western Conference teams. And that's what they became. They allowed the L.A. Clippers to get under the luxury tax. They helped the L.A. Lakers facilitate a Luka Doncic trade. And they were part of the deal that landed Jimmy Butler in Golden State. So I get the frustration, but we had Richard Smith on a little bit earlier. Smitty was in studio for an entire hour. And I think he did a good job of articulating exactly why, even though the Jazz technically could have got involved in something. And about 2 months ago, I floated out the potential of the Jazz maybe kicking the tires and trying to grab Zion Williamson. And, you know, the reason why I kind of brought that up is it was very obvious that the New Orleans Pelicans, who only have 12 wins on the season, were going to do something to try to reset because they had to. And, you know, their reset obviously included sending Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors, but I wondered aloud whether or not the New Orleans Pelicans, who, by the way, have the 11th highest payroll in pro basketball. The New Orleans Pelicans have allocated $175 million roughly in salary to a team that has won 12 games. The New Orleans Pelicans are 11th in payroll, and their team has won 12 games. The Pelicans' payroll is higher than the Clippers, than Philadelphia, than Memphis, than Cleveland, who's one of the best teams in the entire league, Oklahoma City, which is just the best run franchise in all of pro basketball. So if the Pelicans were going to do something, why not utilize a bevy of draft assets, clean books, and some young players to try to go all in and get a player like that? Well, what the Pelicans have made clear, DeJounte Murray, season-ending injury, Brandon Ingram sent along to Toronto, is they're going to go all in one more time to try to build around this young player. But if the Dallas Mavericks were concerned about Luka Doncic and his off-court habits and whether or not he could stay in shape, and the apparent trepidation and, you know, operating with caution, instead of paying Luka Doncic the supermax this offseason, which would be $350 million, they were too concerned about his habits to do that. If you do not want to pay Luka Doncic the supermax, you are in the wrong business. That's my opinion, but they know him better than any of us. And their calculation is they don't believe Luka can get you where you need to go to win a championship. I mean, it's weird for me that that's your reasoning. They were in the finals last year. Combined regular season and playoff minutes, Luka Doncic led the NBA. How many people realize that? Like, for all the now, he's missed 17 games. He has not been right this year. And yes, he tends to show up in camp looking like he was home, maybe enjoying himself a few lagers here or there. But he always gets himself in shape for the time of year that matters. And Nikola Jokic is no, long-distance marathon runner, right? I mean, it's just different for each player. Each player is unique. Nikola Jokic does not look like a dynamic world-class athlete, but he is the best basketball player in the world right now and has been for about 5 years. You don't hear Denver talking about his inability to keep himself in shape. But if Dallas is really concerned about this with Luka, if that was the main impetus for Nico Harrison moving him on to Los Angeles, I just wondered where David Griffin was with Zion, because you've got to be concerned at this point about his inability to stay right and stay healthy and stay in shape. But the Pelicans elected not to do that. And I think the Jazz right now, I referenced the John Hollinger piece earlier, really like John's work, always have. John was with ESPN for a number of years, took a front office job with the Memphis Grizzlies, and now he's over with The Athletic. he did a good job of outlining why in pro basketball, there are two camps typically. You're either in or you are very much out. And that's not a great business model. It's one of the things the NFL seems to be able to do very well, juxtaposed to the NBA's approach. Because no matter which fan base you're talking about, you just want to start the season feeling like you have a chance for something exciting. And in my opinion, there are way too many teams in pro basketball whose fan bases do not start the year feeling like that. Now, in the NFL, when the dynasties emerge, and right now we're kind of in the middle of one with the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Patriots for a number of years felt like they were going to win it every year. But at least you feel like you have a shot more often than not, unless you are one of the bottom feeders, and there just aren't very many in pro football. There are some, but not as many as there are in the NBA. You know, there are too many fan bases that every year start the season feeling like that you don't have a chance to do anything at all. And as John points out, you're either in or you're out. Where you don't want to be is where the Miami Heat appeared to have put themselves after moving on from Jimmy Butler, and that is right in the middle. I mean, Andrew Wiggins allows you not to bottom out, and you get some draft capital to build around Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. But you just do not want to be in the middle, which is where the Jazz were the past couple of years. That's no man's land. If you're there, you are irrelevant. You're not moving up. You're not moving down. You're just sitting there doing nothing. So the Jazz simply are a team right now that are among the groups that are out. They just are. Fun win last night, and it's a team that's starting to show some improvement with some young players starting to pop a little bit. I really like Isaiah Collier. Now, I hesitate because the bottom line with Isaiah is that if he does not learn to knock down open three-point shots, like Golden State was intentionally lagging off of him last night, daring him to shoot it from three. And he's been a little bit better in that direction. But if you cannot learn to shoot from three, you cannot be a lead guard in pro basketball. You cannot be a player, honestly speaking, certainly on the wing in pro basketball. Keontae George, he's being brought off the bench. It feels like Keontae is starting to embrace that in a way that maybe he wasn't prior to. No matter what, if you're a competitor, you view that as a demotion. You can talk about John Havlicek or Manu Ginobili or right now Jordan Clarkson here in Salt Lake. And Clarkson always talks about how when he was moved to the bench, because he was a starter in the NBA for a while, he's a good player for good teams. But his role coming off the bench is really what's allowed him to extend his career and make a lot of money. Keontae George in the NBA is a player that will be brought off the bench for a good team and a combo scorer for a team that's trying to win games. So I get what Will is trying to do here to kind of see how that dynamic unfolds. And I thought last night both of them were really, really good. But these wins, obviously, you know, if you're a competitor for a coach or a player, the wins incrementally kind of put some wind in your sails. But they really don't help the long-term vision, the long-term goal. I mean, I know there are a lot of Jazz fans today confused and wondering, with all of these good players available, why didn't the Jazz use their assets to grab a couple and then maybe you stop benching Market and then maybe you've got something here. But the problem is, I don't know that any of these players, I mean, if you were able to get Luka and AD, like the players that the Jazz were, you know, probably could have been in the conversations about don't really change the needle this year. And I think what the Jazz are doing, while it's pain tolerance for a fan base, is the absolute correct thing to do by simply long gaming it, being one of the teams that right now is out. You're either in or you're out. The Jazz are out. They're clearly out. They're playing possum. Okay, and so if you're asking yourself the question, like, wait a second, I'm reading all these things about the Jazz approach to the trade deadline, and essentially what they were conduits to help teams in their own conference, and that doesn't resonate with you, I get it. But it is the right thing to do. And honestly, in a way, it might be the only thing to do in the modern day and age of pro basketball for a team that plays their basketball in Salt Lake City. As cruel as that sounds, it just kind of is the deal. So as far as teams that have been applauded, winners and losers, right? We all love the winners and losers after the trade deadline. Clearly, Los Angeles, their odds to win the NBA championship did move up quite a bit. They're still behind Oklahoma City. They're still behind the Denver Nuggets. So right now, OKC is the favorite to win the West. Denver's 2, but LA is 3 now. And they have improved their odds in Vegas. I still believe that this move by the Lakers is more of a reset for the next decade than it is a needle mover or a game changer this year. OKC is a buzzsaw, man. They're getting Chet back on Friday. Chet has not played since November the 10th, and you wouldn't even know it because they keep winning, because they had Isaiah Hartenstein. Now they're going to be at full strength. There's no team in the West, in my opinion, that has a chance against OKC. Now, Jokic is going to keep you involved. And by the way, I think the Denver Nuggets are among the biggest losers of this deadline by far. Like, if the Jazz had Nikola Jokic and didn't do anything to surround him with talent, we would be killing them today. Nikola Jokic is generational. He's the best player in the world and has been for about 5 years. And last year, he was awesome, MVP again, but they ran out of gas against the Timberwolves in the playoffs because he didn't have help. And he's so good that he makes a player like Bruce Brown. Do you remember Bruce Brown? He was awesome in Denver 3 years ago, and now he's just kind of toiled about, made a little money, but he's not near what he was. Jokic ups the bottom line of his teammates so much that if you just added like a rotational piece, and maybe they do something in the buyout market, I don't know, the buyout market's going to be pretty thin this year. Reggie Jackson, who was already in Denver. Ben Simmons. Do you want to talk about a Ben Simmons buyout situation? It looks like they're going to buy him out. I think Denver blew it by not doing anything, but the Lakers are your big winner. Obviously, they are. Mark Williams is a good player. They needed a big. And by the way, a lot of NBA people claim that the Lakers called Zanuck and Ainge about Walker Kessler. So you now know essentially what Walker would have received on the open market. But I'm glad the Jazz just didn't trade Walker Kessler to the Lakers because he's exactly what they need. But Mark Williams is a good consolation prize. When he's healthy, he's a very productive player. The question ultimately comes down to how much of the interest in the trade deadline spills over into interest into the product, right? Some rumors that Luka might make his debut for the Lakers against the Jazz next week. The Jazz have 2 games against the Lakers next week. So it has been a very entertaining day. It's been a very unprecedented trade deadline day in pro basketball. And the Jazz, again, just conduits to deals that went down, helping teams out in the West get a little bit better. And for their troubles, they received 5 second-round picks, 1 unprotected pick in 2031, and a young wing in K.J. Martin. My whole thing is hopefully good karma comes the Jazz way for helping these deals go down, and they get the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And they draft Cooper Flagg. And if that's the deal, we got something, okay? But we'll have to see. told you that I found a guy that I think you would like. Is this my new guy?
A little Brent Cobb.
Brent
yes.
Cobb. He's good.
And I mentioned too, if you were to ask me for a list of artists that I think should be way more famous than they are, Brent Cobb is probably on the short list there.
Yeah, I was just I was driving around town running some errands because I'm about to leave town, so I had to get everything dialed in. And randomly, he popped up. So the algorithm was like, "You might like this dude," and the algorithm was correct. He's very good.
There we go. Yeah, there's not a whole lot. There's a couple albums there. There's a if you take a deep dive, it's only going to take you a couple days or so, depending on your listenership. So, yeah, Brent Cobb, dive in,
check him out. All right, let's see. I'm out. I'm done. I've had enough.
Adios.
Got a new gig. Got a new job. So that's it for me.
Good knowing you.
Going to be a male model.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Going to start tomorrow.
Finally.
Full time.
It's about time you switch over.
Yeah. So I'm out. Well, the real story is I'm just going home for the weekend. I'm going back to the motherland, going back to God's country in New York and Connecticut.
So you're modeling for Roan.
We do that you and I do that every day anyway.
That's fair.
We should get more free gear than we get, quite frankly. I know a guy over there. I'll talk to him.
Yeah, send that email.
So you got Porter and our guy Tony Parks tomorrow, and Porter and our guy Tony Parks on Monday, and I'll be back on Tuesday. Now, before I say goodnight, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, because here's the deal. The big game is almost here, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, which is the best place to win cash while watching the game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw for 1 yard for you to win a square. Now, that's important because you only need to win 2 squares to win 1,000 times your cash, up to it at least. If you're correct on one other stat projection, you actually win real cash. So check out the promos tab of any of the Super Sweat Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promotional funds. Now, the quarterback that needs to throw for only 1 yard for you to win plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. He wears number 15. His name is Patrick Mahomes. So my guess is you're going to win that square. Other stat projections available for Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Travis Kelce, and Xavier Worthy. Remember to check the Prize Picks app for up-to-date player projections. And more good news, you get free money. So if you haven't tried it yet, go get the free money. Put that money on the Patrick Mahomes square and one other. You can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It really is that simple. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Got to give it to you. Time for my Super Bowl picks. I won't be on air until Tuesday. Are you ready, Porter? Because you know the deal. My picks are typically stone cold, rock solid, ironclad.
Yeah, you want to tune in for these ones.
Indeed.
That's for sure.
Final score, 24-23.
Ooh, you going under?
I am going under slightly. Over-under is 48.5 because Philly's defense is crazy, and I just think Mahomes and Kansas City is going to be very diabolical. Final score, 24-23. The Chiefs get their third straight.
Wow. Three-peat, which they have come to an agreement with Pat Riley. They can use that, by the way.
I did see that.
Very important.
I need to think of a term that I can just copyright.
I think everyone's kind of maybe gotten it already, right? Like there can't be too many that are left that are going to be actually, you know what? Never mind. I say that, but then in the year 2024, there was I think the Hawk Tua coin was worth like $18 billion. So
yeah, man, and the kids speak a totally different language. Like, did you know if you say it's all Gucci to me, it means it's all good, it's all cool? Like, that's the new thing. You say it's all Gucci.
You're a little behind if you didn't know Gucci was good.
I'm fine being behind. Well, hold on. I'm fine being behind for Gen Z slang. I'm a man in my mid-40s.
That one might be more my slang. You might be like a decade behind on that one.
Well, it doesn't really matter. The point is every generation has new dumb things they come up with to explain things that have been around forever. Like, oh, you're gaslighting me. No, we just disagree. Sorry that you came up with a freaking term.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think of one while I'm gone to copyright.
I like it. You should start trademarking terms for not the olds, but somewhere in the middle there.
Just people, ultimately, if you can copyright three-peat and make billions of dollars, maybe I need to do the same. All right, so I will talk to you guys on Tuesday. Give Porter and Tony your attention, please, tomorrow and Monday afternoon. Porter, what do you guys have coming up on a Friday show?
On a Friday edition of the program, of course, we're previewing the Super Bowl. That's going to be the bulk of the conversation and trade deadline with Tony and I. We'll go back and forth on the remainder of the NBA season, and then, of course, give you guys a deep dive into the Super Bowl. Thor Nystrom stops by talking some football. Paul Pugmire stops by talking some golf. We'll get our PGA Tour leaderboard updates out of the way with him. Thurl Bailey stops by the program and hoping for Bobby Marks and some things in the works there. But, yeah, it's going to be Super Bowl, NBA trade deadline, a little bit of Jazz, a little bit of Utes, and expand from there.
It's all Gucci to me. Sounds like that show's going to have some serious riz.
As long as, you have a good time, you go back to New York, visit the family, enjoy your time with the fam. When you get back, it'll be all Gucci.
Gotta love it. So enjoy that, Porter, Tony, Friday, Monday. I'll talk to you guys on Tuesday. Special thank you today to Andy Larson, Richard Smith, Sean Syed, as well as our good friends over at Sports Court. For any sound you may have missed, go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available for free in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page, which is called The